Here. Mr. Coffey?
Here.
Dr. Selkrig? Ms. Osiander? Mr. Flynn? Ms. Johnston? Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I see 10 smiling faces and some tan faces, so we're insanely jealous. Dr. Selkrig, would you please lead us in the pledge to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't even remember what I did, but I remember doing it. We have 2 sets of minutes for approval before us.
Move to accept the minutes of
January
January 30th, 2009.
Second. Thank you. Any comments or revisions to the minutes of January 30th? Any objection to acceptance of these minutes? Seeing none, the minutes of January 30th are approved. Second set of minutes.
Move to accept the minutes of February 17th,
Second.
2009.
Second. Thank you. February 17th minutes are before us. Any comments or corrections to the minutes of February 17th? Seeing no comments, any objection to approval of these minutes? Seeing none, the minutes of February 17th, 2009 are approved. Next item on the agenda, Mayor's report. Mr. Klayman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2 things to note. I think the members of the Assembly may have heard some of the public information announcements on the radio in terms of potholes that we've been encouraging the public to come and call the city hotline so we know where to repair potholes, because the public eyes are the best eyes to find the potholes. And so there's on the website there's a pothole report number, and the other part is we've received a lot of calls in the last few weeks about trying to get the street cleaning started sooner than later. That usually starts around the 1st of May, but we've been able to start that in the last week to 10 days to try to get some of the dust cleaned up earlier than normal. Obviously, it's not an overnight process, but we're moving forward on that as well. Those are the only 2 things I have.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have the pothole repair hotline on speed dial on my cell phone, as well as the state road maintenance speed dial, in case anyone's interested. You're right; it's our eyes that count.
And just on that note, when the public calls the city, if it turns out to be a state road, the city will also report it to the state, so there's not a requirement to call both numbers. You can call the city and get the information about the state roads, and they will forward it to the state.
Great. So we don't have to drive around with a list of state roads and try to keep track of where we're driving and where our boundaries are. Thank you. Under the Assembly Chair's report, I have the pleasure of awarding 5-year pins to Ms. Osiander and Mr. Coffey, who have served. April 20th, 2009 marks your 5th anniversary as municipal employees. Mr. Coffey.
We're getting along in the Thank you.
All right. Committee reports. We only had a meeting a week ago. Have we had any committee meetings since then? Anybody who has something to report? Mr. Gutierrez?
We've had a change in the date and time I announced last week for the tour of the crime lab, and unfortunately it will conflict with the Title 21 committee meeting. I am very sorry, but after changing it over and over and over again, it landed on that time. If we absolutely positively cannot, if members of the Title 21 committee were interested in going, Dr. Selkrig, you're shaking your head yes, I'll change it.
Thank you.
I'm very sorry. This has been a jumping all over the place, and I know you have a lot of important work to do there, so I will change it so that we can accommodate everybody. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Mr. Coffey has a question for you.
Thank you. This is a tour of the existing crime lab, not the new construction?
Not the hole in the ground, no.
I've done that, so I thank you. I'll be at the Title 21 meeting.
The Title 21 meeting will go on, I believe, as Ms. Gray Jackson, you have an announcement regarding committees?
Thank you,
Microphone.
Madam Chair. No, not an announcement, but I always like to seize the opportunity to make a comment about the Budget and Finance Committee. Of course, we didn't have a meeting since the last meeting, but I just want to remind folks that we are scheduled to meet on Thursday at noon. I'm not sure what conference room it's going to be in, but it's online. And I sent an email to our O&B director to find out which department was going to be joining us to present to the committee their ideas for ways to save money. And at the last meeting, as I mentioned, the IT department was present and talked about their ideas, and I just want everybody to know that I'm working with the IT director to see how we can implement these cost savings measures. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Birch, any announcements?
I did attend the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors meeting on Friday. Mayoral candidate Eric Croft presented there, and the board was having some review and discussion of issues affecting the community and taxes and kind of the economic situation relative to OCS development was at the top of the list. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Mr. Coffey, any reports?
Nothing to report, Madam Chair.
Dr. Selcraig.
The Community and Economic Development Committee will meet the last Wednesday of this month, and we will be looking at the new SEDS, which is the thank you, Mary Jo.
Comprehensive economic development strategies.
And well, it would be great if we could get a hard copy like you got me for everybody.
I'll be glad to
for
do
maybe
that.
our next meeting. And so, I'm hoping that we get it to people. And then, if you have any comments or want to participate in that meeting and come and comment on it, please, everybody feel welcome to attend.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander.
Title 21 meetings Thursday, 9:30 to 11:30. We've been talking about connectivity standards, neighborhood protection, traffic impact analysis, and we're going to be moving into landscaping, fencing, and screening. So if you're interested in those topics, please feel free to attend.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sort of an intermix of legislative committee and liaison to ACVB. The ACVB board worked hard and was very happy to see $1 million in cruise ship head tax money appropriated for roof repair at the Egan Convention Center in the state capital budget. It's one of the very few items that we succeeded in getting in the capital budget this year. And, of course, as many of you know, the Egan Center is heavily used by the cruise companies for transfer of passengers from they come into town on buses and go back to the airport and so on and so forth. So it does have a close tie-in with our cruise industry. And to the extent this is of interest to you, the ACVB board would be delighted to have your support in letters to the governor encouraging her to keep that in the budget. That's all I have for today.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Ms. Johnston.
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. We have an addendum to the agenda. I would welcome a motion. Mr. Gutierrez, go ahead.
We'd like to move to change the order of the day to take up item 15A, the certification of the April 7th regular municipal election.
Okay.
Did I hear a second? Ms. Gray Jackson?
Point of order.
Yes, Ms. Osiander, go ahead.
So you're wanting to skip the consent agenda?
We're wanting to certify the election.
No, I understand
first.
that.
I'm not going to skip the consent agenda, just want to skip to...
Eliminate. Move to the end of the agenda. And I just wondered why.
No, I'm not moving the consent agenda to the end of the agenda. I'm moving this item to the front of the agenda.
Oh, because of the... Okay, got it.
That's right. Okay. That's been moved and seconded to change the order of the day to take up certification of the April 7th, 2009 regular municipal election. Is there any objection to changing the order of the day? Seeing no objection, that is unanimous that we have changed the order of the day. That's right. We just received the Assembly Memorandum AM 242-2009 from the Municipal Election Commission. It is before us. And a motion to accept.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey and Mr. Gutierrez. Would the Municipal Election Commission like to come forward and present to us their findings? And we look forward to what you have to tell us.
My name is Ethel Tuck, and I'm chairman of the Election Commission. With me tonight is Barbara Mischler, Maria Clemson, and she's a new member this year, and Max Olson. Norma Sullivan is out of town because of her brother's illness, and Evelyn Hansen couldn't make it tonight. We had a real good turnout this time as far as our envelopes were concerned. We ended up with 11 rejected envelopes in the absentee. We had 79 question envelopes rejected, and the mail was 42. And a lot of those were on the question with some mistakes that was made at the polls where the people didn't fill out that they were a citizen of the United States, that they were over 18 years of age, and lived in the precinct within 30 days. It was something they just skipped for no reason, but they just skipped it. Other than that, we had, excuse me, a total of 8,857 envelopes that we went through. That's
Very good. And the election results, those affected the election results how? Let's see. I haven't done this before. I don't know how to do it. Nothing. The school board seat was decided. Yeah. All of the elections of mayor or school board seats have been properly decided, and the bond issue that was in question on election night has now firmly passed. Is that correct?
the way I understand it, yes.
All right. Any questions from Assembly members of the Election Committee?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Gutierrez, go ahead, please.
Just first, very quickly, to thank you all for all of your hard work. You do a tremendous job, and we appreciate it. Is the number of absentee ballots cast, is that actually increasing?
Yes.
Do you have any idea why? Is it just convenience, or?
Well, part of it's convenience. A lot of them are snowbirds. They're leaving town. They want to get out of town at this time of the year. So the convenience part for early in-person absentee voting is just, it really came up this year. Then the mail absentee for military personnel or somebody that is living outside of outside of the state of Alaska for a while. But yes.
Well, I'm happy to see that, because I've always been a believer that anything that we can do to make it easier for folks to vote is a good thing. But thank you again for all that you do.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Ms. Osiander. Hold on.
I want to thank you, too, for all the hard work, and I know it can be exhausting. I heard two issues, and I don't know, they're probably not related to you, but more the clerk's office. There was a little brief flurry of emails about some ballots that went out without the sleeve, the interior sleeve. I don't know.
The secrecy sleeve, yes.
Yeah. Did you hear anything about that further?
Oh, no, I just got a bunch of orange pieces of paper wrapped around the ballots. The secrecy sleeves weren't included this year,
Okay.
And they just didn't get taken out of the instructions, I believe.
Okay, so that didn't impact the election in any way?
No.
Okay, and then the second thing I heard, and this is probably for the clerk's office too, I apologize, there was some frustration about accessing election results on the city's webpage. So I don't know if we know anything about that.
Ms. Osiander, I believe the municipal clerk would be happy to address both of your questions.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We haven't used, yes.
We're not.
Ms. Osiander, we haven't used secrecy sleeves for a number of years, but it's just a line in the instructions that didn't get deleted. For about 300 ballots went out, but we've taken it out. It's been no problem. What happens if you use them, it's just additional weight and people have to pay more postage and it gets very confusing. But the way the process that the Commission uses is very careful. When a ballot is ready to be opened, an absentee or question ballot, it's ripped open and the envelope goes basically one way and the ballot goes the other way, so nobody ever sees how a person voted. Plus, you're dealing with so many ballots. We counted 5,100 on Saturday alone that there's just, there's no time. But we haven't used secrecy sleeves for a long time. And then the issue on election night with results getting transmitted, I believe, was the vendor that IT was using. But we had results right away, and people were carrying them across the street to the Denina Center. But the results were coming in fine. It's just the transmission.
So maybe the question should go to IT, because I did hear a significant number of complaints about how...
As did we.
Okay. Do you don't know anything about what the problem was? So I should talk to IT, I'm assuming?
I think IT can answer that more succinctly than I.
Okay, any further questions? Okay. Oh, I have a group of people on my call list. I'm sorry. Dr. Selkirk.
She's busy.
Oh. Okay. Dr. Selkirk, do you have a question? Okay. Ms. Osiander, you've addressed your questions, and Mr. Gutierrez. Ms. Gray-Jackson.
I apologize. Was a question asked of me?
You were on the request to speak list.
I already spoke, Madam
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gray-Jackson, how about you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to take a moment and thank Ethel as Chair and thank the Elections Commission for their hard work, and also thank our staff, Rupe, for doing a good job. And I would highly recommend, since we do have an Elections Committee in place, that when we have concerns, we need to take those concerns to the Elections Committee, because there are always ways to do things differently, maybe better, and improve on things. And that's the avenue that we have to start the ball rolling on making things happen. So thank you again.
Thank you. I too would like to. Dr. Selkirk?
No, I'm waiting.
Okay.
Sorry.
Punch it out. Okay. I too would like to thank all of you for your hard work. I did stop in on Friday and looked on for a while you counted envelopes and called to each other, and it was, I could tell you had your hearts in it. You paid absolutely no attention to me. And there was another candidate waiting to see if her election results would change. Any objection to approval of acceptance of the election results? Seeing none, the election results are accepted. Thank you very much, and congratulations to all of you who were elected, and thank you for your service, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I appear to have been missed, but I also personally wanted to thank the Elections Commission and the clerk's office staff that works on the election for all your incredibly hard work. I was in the City Hall on the weekend, and just this past weekend, and I noticed a couple of cars that I recognized of people from the clerk's office, and I thought to myself, they got here before I did, and they stayed here after I was here. And I was really pleased to see that dedication and the hard work, and it means an enormous amount to our community, the time that you spend, because it really, the public voting is the core of our democracy, and your job makes sure that those values are sustained. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Klayman. All right.
Madam
Next
Chairman?
Dr. Selkirk.
I'd like to move the order of the day. And I'd like to take up the mayor's veto of AO 200936.
Second.
Wait. Just a moment. We have to incorporate the addendum first.
Okay, that'd be fine. We can return
Where
to
is
it.
that item?
I thought we moved. Is it on the addendum?
I don't see it. No.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay. Well, let's incorporate all this into the agenda, and then take it up.
We don't have to.
Okay.
It's a special order.
All right. Dr. Selkirk, go ahead and make your motion.
I made the motion, and I believe Mr. Coffey seconded.
Okay. What are we taking up?
It is It's AO200936, and it has to do with assembly procedural matters, and the mayor has it's an action that we took in our last meeting regarding our ability to override Robert Rules of Order with a vote of 6 in cases where the assembly deemed that our procedural approach might be different than Robert Rules of Order. And I guess
Just a moment, Dr. Selcraig. Okay, that item has been moved and seconded to change the order of the day. We need 8 votes. Is there any objection to
Yes.
changing the order of the day? Then we need to vote.
May I speak to that first, Madam Chair?
Yes, just a moment, Mr. Gutierrez. Let me get up here. Go ahead and speak to your...
Dr. Selcraig presented some very interesting information and a very interesting argument that I am quite interested in and exploring, but I'd like to have a little more time this evening to talk to folks about that, gather some more information. I am very willing to consider it, but I prefer not to gallop into it right at this moment, if that's okay. That's just me.
I'm fine with waiting till later in the evening.
Okay, that's fine.
The second's fine, too.
Okay.
There's some questions.
So your motion is withdrawn, and you'll bring it up. You bring it forward later in the evening.
Don't we just postpone it till later in the evening?
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
not
Very good.
withdrawn.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, we didn't. We're never talking about.
Oh, okay. I see.
So I do withdraw the motion to change the order of the day, and I will.
Okay. Let's vote not to change the order. Let's please vote no to not change the order of the day, and this item will be taken up under special orders at the end of the agenda.
There you go.
Fine.
Madam Clerk, I can't. I don't seem to be able to vote.
Hit the red line.
I did. It's not cooperating. I'm on 15.
Are we all on?
Birch?
Okay.
Ms. Johnston?
You want to just vote no because we're going to wait.
Oh, okay. I'm good. My vote is marked.
No. Here we go. Good. Thank you.
Okay. That item stays where it is under special orders. Go right ahead, Ms. Osiander. Thank you. We have the addendum to incorporate first, please.
Second.
Very good. Okay. The addendum has been moved and seconded. On the addendum, we have 9D3 under new business, Assembly Memorandum AM 236-2009, Bangkok Cafe, number 4877, restaurant, eating place, liquor license, and restaurant designation through the Downtown Community Council and the Clerk's Office. Item 9F Frank 6, Ordinance AO 2009-56, an ordinance to provisionally adopt new sections 21.07.010, general provisions, 21.07.020, natural resource protection, 21.07.030, private open space, 21.07.040, drainage, stormwater treatment, erosion control, and prohibited discharges, 21.07.050, utility distribution facilities, and 21.07.140, operational standards, amending the Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21, subject to concurrent final passage and approval of all provisionally adopted chapters of Title 21. Public hearing is set for May 12, 2009. That is through Assemblymember Osiander, and it is accompanied by Assembly Memorandum AM 241-2009. Item 9F7, Resolution AR 2009-111, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly to name the trails and trail features in Far North Bicentennial and Kincaid Parks through the Mayor's Office. Public hearing is set for May 26, 2009. And the final item on the addendum is 11B, Notice of Reconsideration of Resolution AR 2008-253, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly adopting specific wildlife public safety policies for implementation by the administration and authorizing the allocation of municipal resources to ensure the safety of Anchorage citizens. Public hearing was closed on the 14th of April. It was amended and approved on the same day, and the notice of reconsideration was given by me on the 15th of April. And under special orders, we'll add we'll take up the mayor's veto of Hold on a second. Let me find this item. The mayor's veto of Assembly Ordinance AO 2009. It's under special orders.
Right, but we're dealing with the consent agenda right now. You're incorporating an addendum to the consent agenda?
I'm incorporating an addendum to the agenda, to special orders, in addition to Dr. Selkirk.
I just as soon take some time with this and decide later at what point,
Okay.
whether we want to deal with it tonight. We have
That's
21
fine.
days, and I want to make sure that everybody's comfortable with it.
Okay, very good. The addendum is before us. Any objection to incorporation of these items into the regular agenda? Seeing none, the addendum is incorporated. Any items to pull from the consent agenda? Oh, any objection to the consent to the agenda as amended? Seeing no objections, the consent agenda is before us. Any items to be pulled? Ms. Osiander?
Madam Chair, I want to give notice that at the next meeting, I'm going to move to amend AO 2006-173S. It's an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code Section 16.95.070 to reduce the cost of municipal ambulance transport assessed to patients receiving ambulance transport services from the Chugiak Volunteer Fire Department by correcting a code provision pursuant to guidance from Medicare and provide for a resident and non-resident ambulance transport fee schedule.
Okay, and this goes where on the agenda, Ms. Osiander?
It does not need to be on the addendum. However, I wanted to verbally give notice
Okay.
on the advice of council. That's the best way to proceed. The ordinance you'll see at our next meeting.
Okay.
I've been working with the fire department on this.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And the clerk has noted this item? Okay, thank you. Any other items to pull from the consent agenda?
Yeah, we haven't pulled any yet.
Do we have a motion on the consent agenda?
I'm
I
already
think we had that. We had that quite some time ago. Who's the second on the consent agenda, please?
Mr. Coffey was.
Okay.
Madam
Coffey,
Chair,
were
could
you
we
the
pull items now?
Yes, please go ahead, Ms. Osiander.
I'd like to pull Bravo 2 on the regular agenda.
Anything else, Ms. Osiander?
No, nothing else.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else pulling items from the consent agenda this evening?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Coffey, go ahead.
The request of the administration 9E1 for purposes of recognizing the person who got their award
Thank you.
or achievement award.
Any other items to pull from the consent agenda? Mr. Birch.
9F5.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Seeing no further items, the consent agenda is before us. Any objection to passage of the consent agenda as amended? Seeing none, the consent agenda passes. First item before us, Ms. Osiander?
Move to approve.
Thank you. That would be Resolution AR 2009-106, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage providing for the appropriation of a donation of $85,500 for the purchase of library materials for the Mountain View Branch Library. Ms. Osiander, go ahead.
I wanted to pull this because I think there might be some merit in postponing this for 1 month.
Seconded.
My rationale is that we're going to be dealing with budget over the next few weeks, and I noted on one version of the budget it involved shutting down the Samson Diamond Library. I also am aware of a materials shortfall in the Eagle River Library, and my understanding is there's also a materials shortfall for LUSAC. If you recall, we put a request in our legislative package for support for those. I think it might be better to look at the library system holistically, and we'll have more information shortly, I believe, once we get our budget in place. So I would like, yes, I was just talking, Mr. Coffey, but now I'd like to make the motion, and that is move to amend this, 1 month, which would be to May 25th.
That's 26th.
Pardon
May
me.
26th. Hard to see.
May 26th.
Okay. Any objection to postponing this item to May 26th?
Madam Chair?
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a comment on the document. before we even...
Yes, go ahead.
Is it appropriate to make my comment at this point?
I think that's fine.
Okay.
The motion is on postponement. Does it have to relate to the postponement?
Yes, actually it does. I don't think we should postpone this. And the reason why I don't think we should postpone it, unless I'm reading the document incorrectly, I think it's real clear that the foundation is providing $85,000 specifically for the Mountain View Library. And I don't know if it's in our purview to decide where the money is going to go, whether it's needed somewhere else or not. And if someone from the administration can comment on what I just said, I really would appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson. Any comment from the administration? Yes. Welcome. Please tell us.
Hi, I'm Karen Keller. I'm the library director. That $85,500 is from private funders, and it's been specifically donated for the Mountain View Branch Library, and it can't be moved around. $75,000 came from the Gottstein Family Foundation, $10,000 from Wells Fargo, and $5,000 from ConocoPhillips. So it was specifically earmarked for Mountain View.
Thank you, Ms. Keller. Any questions for the speaker? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Coffey? Is your mic on, sir?
The absence of clarity is that I recognized it as a grant because of the funding source and what they said, but the fact that it was specific to one library and the fact that it came from 3 donors was not in the memorandum. So it may be just for clarification in the future, if we knew that, we might avoid having to do some of this stuff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The motion before us to post is, Ms. Osiander, go ahead.
Well, I guess I needed to clarify a little more my intent here. I was aware that it was a grant specific for the Mountain View Library. I'm also aware that we don't have the ability to say, oh, well, we're not going to take what you wanted to do with your money, we're going to put it someplace else. However, I personally am not in favor of closing down the Diamond Library. And it may be that these people who did this donation feel that if we do decide to do that closure, they may want to direct their money elsewhere. I don't know. I don't want to second guess people. But I do know if I'm making a donation to a private agency or to a public agency, I like to be aware of all the potential impacts out there. And I just thought it would be beneficial to them to know what the status of the library system as a whole is. Maybe they won't choose to change their mind. And if so, I'll gratefully accept it. But possibly they could. I can't forecast how this body will act on the budget that's before them.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Mr. Flynn.
I just wondered, Mary Jane, you've been very involved in this process. Do you have any insight into Ms. Osiander's concern?
Through the chair, we work on all the libraries simultaneously, and we don't have the luxury of directing how the funds go from our private donors. Okay. Most of them are very specific, as in the case with Gottstein. He dedicated to the Mountain View Library because that was his specific choice. He wanted a library where children could walk to it and ride their bikes. He wanted a neighborhood library. So we're following through on the wishes of the donors. And I realize there are other libraries that have needs, and we are working on those simultaneously to bring in new funders and talk to those existing funders about new opportunities. But the commitments have been made.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess based on that, I would encourage the body to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Any further? Oh, Dr. Selkirk.
I'm not going to support this, but I do want to make the comment that I think Ms. Osiander's desire is right on. And hopefully as we interact with people who are donating, and I'm sure the library is working in those areas, but actually to begin to present the broad menu so that people can see that there are some libraries that really are in dire straits and more vulnerable. And my hunch is that along Ms. Osiander's intent, there's a possibility that we may be able to attract some resources to those libraries. Mm-hmm. You know, Mountain View's had a lot of attention, and it's been a success in many ways, but it's taken a lot of resources, and there are clearly shoulder neighborhoods and neighborhoods around town that have similar challenges, and so.
Well,
yes.
I just had one more comment. We did just get money funded for Samson Diamond. We did get Rasmussen money for the Samson Diamond and put in significant enhancements in terms of furniture and other equipment in the Sampson Diamond Library in 2008, and that was private funds through the Rasmussen Foundation, so we have had monies.
I'm not doubting that there's an effort to support all the libraries. I think as we move forward, there's this real sensitivity to try to the best we can, and I think I'm just validating that concern, although I'm not voting for this because I don't think it's going to work in the way that Ms. Osiander intended.
Okay, thanks all of you. Seeing no further comments, the motion before us is to postpone this item to May 26th. Please vote.
Mr. Gutierrez? Oh.
Mr. Coffey, please come and vote.
We're waiting.
We're waiting for your vote. It's all right. We have a short agenda tonight. Take your time. The motion is to postpone to May 26th. Okay. Are we going to wait for Mr. Gutierrez, or should we just count him absent? Okay. That item fails. 4 yes, 5 no, and Mr. Gutierrez was absent. Okay. We are going to hear. I think we've already heard quite a bit, and the motion is before us to accept. The motion. I guess we need a motion.
Do we have a motion?
Okay. We have a motion. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve. It's already considered.
Okay. Any objection to approval of this item, to acceptance of this $85,000? Ms. Osiander, go ahead.
I just want to thank the generosity, particularly the Rasmussen folks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Osiander. Any objection to this item passage? Seeing none, that item passes unanimously. Next item, the administration wants to tell us about 9E1.
Yeah, I pulled it, Madam Chair.
Coffey, go ahead.
Move to accept. Thank you. And if I'd like to defer to Ms. Weddleton to congratulate Teresa Peterson on the Achievement Award, but Ms. Weddleton knows more about it than I do.
Through the chair, Mr. Coffey, thank you very much. I'd like to point out the municipality's controller, Teresa Peterson, here in the audience. Teresa has been with the municipality just over a year, and when she became controller, we had lost our assistant controller, our fund accounting supervisor, our grant accounting supervisor, and our capital assets supervisor all at once, and our external auditors had a switch in their audit manager. But she persevered and even managed to win a very prestigious national award that the municipality does not win every year. So I just wanted to congratulate her and thank her for her hard work.
Thank you very much. Any objection to approval of this item? Seeing none, this item is approved. Thank you very much for your excellent service. Clearly, it's been recognized by the professionals among us, and we certainly appreciate your work. Thank you. I'd like to make note, I skipped announcing that we did appoint Andrew Tierney this evening to the Transportation Commission under the consent agenda. If Mr. Tierney is present, you're free to come forward and talk to us. If not, thank you very much for your service. We appreciate all members of all commissions. Next item, Mr. Birch, you pulled 9F5.
Let's see, we have to advance this for public hearing. What's the appropriate? Just move to introduce.
This is Resolution AR 2009-108, a resolution appropriating $1,512,000 in federal highway safety improvements project funds for the Anchorage Area Countdown Pedestrian Signals Project. Mr. Birch, go ahead.
Something that interested me, it appears that it's basically $1.5 million for putting up the very nice new traffic signals that have the countdown, which I think is kind of nice when you're coming up to a traffic light. But I did notice that the work was basically going to be accomplished with in-house labor. So it's $1.5 million, and there's a significant portion of that work that's going to be accomplished with in-house labor. And so the question is, the in-house labor that I'm trying to understand what component of that is, if that's overtime, or if it frees up $1.5 million worth in the operating budget for that maintenance department, if it's going to be offset by capital investment. And I don't know if we generally do this in-house, or if this would be something that would be more reasonably contracted out. But we did approve a budget that identified a number of personnel in that department, and it seems like if you're putting $1 million back into the department for on a capital project, that it's going to free up some operating budget.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Birch. Mr. Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Birch, I'll have Mr. Wilbur reach out to you. I don't think he's with us tonight, but I'll have him reach out to you later this week and give you the spending breakdown on this and the extent to which it takes advantage of existing staff versus external staff.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Birch. I'd like to note that that item is set for public hearing on May 12th, 2009. Any objection to the introduction of this item? Seeing none, that item is introduced and will be heard on May 12th. We are at the end of the consent agenda, and it is not yet 6 p.m. Madam Clerk, we have old business on under item 11A. Let's take that up now. A motion would be in order for item 11A. Who would like to move item 11A? Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson. That's Resolution AR 2009-94.
Sorry,
resolution.
Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Waiving the platting and vacation fees. Ms. Osiander.
If you recall, there were two items that the Assembly wanted further clarification on. We did receive a memorandum from Mr. Weaver. I also followed through on my commitment to you. I contacted the state right-of-way officer to try to get a better understanding about the old Glen properties. I also had a conversation with further conversation through emails back and forth with the representative of the Mexico and Alaska. My understanding is that this situation for this restaurant is fairly unique. However, there are other right-of-way intrusions, particularly along our older state highways, where potentially people could come using this as a precedent and ask for some relief. The figure is not yet certain as to the number of property owners along the Old Glen Highway. Basically, she said more than 10, probably less than 30 would be the number. And there's no indication that any of them necessarily would require the same type of relief or would even come to us and ask for relief, but potentially they could. The other item was the discrepancy between what the presentation from the applicant and what Mr. Nelson's assessment of the need was. And apparently that is entirely dependent on how the situation is handled. If there is a decision to go ahead and replat the property showing the vacation, then it could be up in the $6,000 to $7,000 range. And for just the city fees, with an additional $2,000 on top of it for private surveyors and legal work. If instead the decision is to go with an abbreviated plat and to put a note on the title indicating the vacation, then it could be as low as the $1,400 that was referenced. But there's no certainty at this time which route would be followed. And Mr. Weaver is here if there's.
Mr. Coffey.
Is that choice at the option of the owner of the restaurant, or is it something the city could impose on the owner of the restaurant?
Mr. Weaver could probably answer this better. My understanding is there have been preliminary discussions, and it appears now as if the less expensive would work, but there's no certainty that that would be the final decision. Is that correct, Mr. Weaver?
Madam Chair, members of the Assembly, in discussing it with the petitioner's rep, we discussed both ways to go about it, and one was pretty expensive and one was not as expensive, the $1,200 versus the $8,000 to $10,000, and it's really up to them to decide how they wanted to pursue that. If they do the cheaper way, the plat will never be changed, will not be changed, and it'll still show this reservation on there, but we'll record a document against the title in the recorder's office making it go away. So in essence, it's gone. So for $1,200, they could make it go away.
Okay, thank you. I have a number of questions for you, Mr. Coffey. Are you satisfied?
I'll follow up, Mr. Weaver. So the petitioner then could follow the procedure that's the $1,200 type, and from all intents and purposes, title insurance, the reality of the situation, all of that would be resolved, but you'd have an old plat in there showing something that no longer exists with a subsequent note showing that it's gone away.
Correct.
And it's their choice.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have questions
Mr. Weaver.
from others. Hold on. Who is calling Mr. Weaver? Mr. Starr, go ahead.
Mr. Weaver, thanks. On line 15 and 16, there's a statement here that talks about a whereas in 1983, the Alaska Supreme Court issued a ruling regarding the applicability of the PLO, resulting in the 100-foot easement having been placed on the plat in error. That's a definitive statement in the whereas here. Probably my interpretation is it's the interpretation of the writer. Is that your view that the plat note was an error, or was that just the determination of the PLO zoning?
Madam Chairman Starr, I haven't researched that with respect to the legal aspect of what that judicial decision, whether it occurred or what it meant for this property. But that would be determined through the vacation process when they actually made application, whether those facts were correct.
There's other cases in the municipality, though, where the PLO interpretation has been sort of enforced through DOT and in other rulings. They're agreeing that the PLO stands. Is that?
Madam Chairman, Mr. Starr, the PLOs are not consistent along the various highways, depending on when they were patented and when they received title and what was in effect at the time, and everyone has to be researched individually.
I get it. Great. Thank you very much.
I have Ms. Gray Jackson next. Question for Mr. Weaver?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I don't have a question for Mr. Weaver.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
But
Weaver.
I just want to thank Ms. Osiander for doing her research like she always does. I appreciate that. But I also want to highlight the last paragraph in the memorandum that Mr. Weaver sent to us. You know, when we talk about setting precedents and other folks that may have the same issue and may come forward to the Assembly asking for a waiver, but Mr. Weaver says in his memorandum that it is true that there are other people with similar circumstances, but to his knowledge, over the past 10 years, there have been very few individuals that have requested that the fees be waived. And as far as the $1,200 is concerned, Ms. Bell is asking that $1,200 be waived. And if it turns out then that it's more than $1,200, then we simply don't waive any more than the $1,200 that she's asking for because of this unusual circumstance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Ms. Osiander.
I wanted to, share with the body where I am with this right now. I believe actually the same. I concur with Ms. Gray Jackson. I think that we should waive the $1,200. I think that, I guess I would, along with that, ask this body to remember that there may be more coming and also to be favorable for these others. Some of the situations in the Old Glen Highway project involve a fire station, a building owned by the community that houses a preschool, one of the original, Spring Creek Lodge, which was one of the original lodges on the old road up to Fairbanks. I think that one reason we may not have seen many of the issues is there hasn't been a lot of work on our main interstates, the Glen or the Seward, that involved a lot of right-of-way taking in the last 10 years. So hopefully there won't be many at all. But I'm going to urge support for the $1,200, but just ask my colleagues to remember that to have the same open mind when other situations occur in the next year or two.
Would it be appropriate to amend it to reflect the $1,200?
Yeah, I plan to do that after discussion, or Ms. Gray Jackson will.
Okay. I have Dr. Selcraig and then Mr. Coffey. Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Dr. Selcraig, go ahead.
I plan to support this, and it's because it's the right thing to do. It's the just thing to do, and I think that when individuals or property owners become kind of a victim of circumstances that are beyond their control that result in expensive, basically potential takings from them, it's just I'll be comfortable, Ms. Osiander, when we deal with this again. And sometimes this is just the cost of a fair government. It's not something that I'm not happy about creating a precedence that's going to be expensive, but the fact is that if it's the right thing to do, it's probably the right thing to do, and I plan to vote for it.
Thank you. Mr. Coffey.
Yes, I spoke to Ms. Gray Jackson, and we have a proposal on the $1,200, but I have a couple of questions of Mr. Weaver, just to make sure we have clarity around the resolution, if I might. Mr. Weaver, do you have a copy of it, of the resolution?
No, sir, I don't.
Well, on line 27, there's a reference to the replat.
Could he get a copy then?
Yeah.
I'll give you mine. He said he did not.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said you
He
did.
said he did not, so you went and read to line 12, you know.
I will turn up my hearing aids. Thank you. Mr. Weaver, just yell at me like you usually do, and all will be fine. Anyway, on line 27, there's a reference. The replat should not be Mrs. Ball's. What word would you use besides replat?
Vacation.
Okay, the vacation. So I would move first to substitute on line 27, page 1, the words replat with the word vacation.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you. Any objection to placing the word vacation in place of the word replat on line 27? Seeing none, it says vacation.
Okay, then on line 32, given what Mr. Weaver said, and correct me, Mr. Weaver, if I'm wrong, I would delete the words platting and on line 32 and have it read that the vacation fees required. Is that the correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So moved.
Okay, the words platting and?
No.
Can it all?
We make this all one motion?
No. I've got different lines, and it'll just take a minute.
You're not entering, though, so it's taking time.
But the board's not there.
It is now.
Just,
So far, there's been no objection.
Thank you.
Platting and are deleted from line 32. Any objection? Seeing none, those words are deleted.
Then finally, at the end of line 33, known as Mexico and Alaska, comma, not to exceed $1,200, add the words not to exceed $1,200. I move and I push the button. Somebody push there we go.
Okay, very good. Any objection to adding the words, comma, not to exceed $1,200 at the end of line 33? Seeing none, that has been amended.
And then finally, Madam Chair, and thank you for the consideration, on line 35, delete the word replat and substitute the word vacation.
Okay. Any objection to placing the word vacation?
Move. There we go.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. The word vacation. Ms. Osiander.
Mr. Weaver has a comment.
And, Madam Chairman, on line 35, you can retain a private land survey as well because they can do it themselves. On line 35, retain a private land surveyor.
So it should read that Ms. Ball will process the vacation.
Yes, sir.
So moved.
Second.
I've got it marked on mine. I'll give it to you.
We'll process the vacation.
Yes, Mrs. Ball will process the vacation. If I can push first motion again, I will. Line 35. Nope, can't do it.
Too many. It's probably result of too many motions.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Weaver.
Okay, Mr. Coffey, your last motion was to replace the word replat with vacation. And that's passed, and you are deleting the words "retain a private land surveyor to."
That's correct.
From line 35. Okay, any objection to deletion of those words? Seeing none, that line is amended. I'm going to read what line 35 now says. Section 2, that Ms. Ball will process the vacation through the municipality. And that's been accepted unanimously.
I know.
Any further motions? Mr. Coffey?
I would like to thank my colleague, Ms. Gray Jackson, for doing all the work on this, and I was delighted at the very, very end to do a small bit to help her because she took care of it, and I appreciate it because it's well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey.
Okay, thank you. This item is before us as amended. Any objections to passage of this item as amended? Seeing none, this item passes unanimously. Where'd that come from? Okay. Very good. It is it 6 o'clock here? Looks like 6 o'clock from here.
Yes.
Okay. All right, appearance requests. Is Mr. Sean Peterson present?
Yes, he is.
Please come forward. Welcome, sir. Please tell us who you are, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello again. I'm Sean Peterson. I live in Eagle River. I appreciate the opportunity I have to make this appearance before you tonight. I come before you tonight to present petitions totaling 1,324 signatures signed in support of maintaining current bus service on People Mover bus routes 77 and 78. I have one copy for the Assembly and an additional copy for the Mayor's office. When People Mover announced it would absorb the second round of budget cuts totaling $422,306 by eliminating bus routes 77 and 78, I started this petition. People from across the municipality and the state signed in support of maintaining current service. People who live within the municipality and without signed this petition. Some from as far away as Kotzebue who are visiting family in Eagle River and rely on public transportation when they do so. People who use public transportation and those who don't signed this petition. People who use bus routes 77 and 78 and people who don't, they all signed this petition. What do all these people have in common? A vision for the future. They realize gasoline prices will not stay below $3 per gallon forever. They realize when gasoline prices soar, so does People Mover ridership. They realize that in order for ridership to increase, convenient and accessible bus service must be available. They realize how easy it is to cut service now and how terribly difficult it is to restore it later. But it is not the general public only who acknowledge this. It is Mayor Clayman, who I spoke with at length regarding this issue. It is Jody Karts, Director of Public Transportation, with whom I've also spoken. It is Debbie Osiander and Bill Starr, my Eagle River representatives, who offered their support in this cause. I gratefully acknowledge Mayor Clayman's decision to restore 70% of the service to these two routes, but I stand firm in my resolve that 70% is not good enough. None of the 1,300 people who signed this petition will be satisfied until the current service we enjoy today is appropriated for. Of the initially proposed $422,306 budget cut, just $122,306 remains unfunded. Surely there is a way to come up with this difference. It is ironic that at a time when Proposition 6, providing for additional municipality public transportation services passed, and when a municipality will be receiving millions of federal stimulus dollars to be used specifically for public transportation, that we are considering cutting service. Newer buses and cleaner bus stops are not what we need. Additional routes are needed. People will begin utilizing public bus service when it becomes more convenient and accessible to them. I plead with this Assembly and the Mayor's office to think longer term. We must find a way to fund public transportation and keep funding it. I think everyone here tonight will agree that there will come a day when extremely high gasoline prices will once again be upon us. My sincere hope is that when that day comes, this municipality will have prepared for it on behalf of its constituents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Starr has a question for you, as does Ms. Osiander.
Not so much as a comment. I'd like to buy the paper so that you incur no cost for bringing the opinions of my constituents primarily. I saw the signature. I think I may even be on there to some capacity. You know, Sean, this is what's important for me to see is government sort of in action and back to those that are there. And I'm really impressed. I heard the verbiage at the community council meeting, and you took it to action. And it's not a constituent issue necessarily, but this is what we're hearing loud and clear. So I'm impressed, and I really appreciate it, and I'm serious about buying the paper because you should not incur the cost to bring the message to us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Ms. Osiander.
I want to thank you, too. We often are contacted by people who are upset or frustrated or irate on an issue. Very seldom does someone follow through to the extent that you have. You have articulately and persuasively, I think, made a significant difference. I saw you on the agenda for community council meetings. I saw your action covered in the local newspaper. I know that you followed through with contacts to a whole lot of people to publicize this issue. The Assembly has been fairly together on supporting maintaining our bus service, but I want to particularly commend you on this comment about look at the routes first and then the stops and the garages later. I think you should stay involved in local government, sir.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Osiander. Dr. Selcraig.
I also want to thank you, and I believe we passed a resolution, this body passed a resolution unanimously asking the mayor to reinstate those routes, along with the cut to services on holidays, because the cut to services on holidays, it also really is a big hit to people who are regular bus users. So
yeah, I agree.
Interestingly, since this issue has come up, I have not had a single person speak to me about what a good idea it is to cut buses. What I've heard over and over and over again is that it's a core service. People are dependent on it. And I've even heard some discussion about how Eagle River has the lowest use. But the fact is that, you know, you don't have a very efficient or regular bus system already. So what we know about buses is that the more frequent they are, the easier they are to access, the higher they're used. And I'm glad to see you here. I hope you'll make this a real commitment, and I think you'll find, I'll certainly work with you, and you'll find people in this body who will work with you on this issue, and not just to serve Eagle River, but to really have a good functional bus system in Anchorage. So thanks for coming out, and thanks for getting those signatures. Suggest those people give the mayor a call.
Yeah, I have. I agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sean, I just want to thank you very much for coming out, and I really love saying that I was bus rider for 21 of the 27 years I live in this community, and I'm a big transit advocate, and I will always be a transit supporter. Keep up the hard work. You will definitely have my support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There are no further questions. Why don't you bring us your petitions?
Ms. Drummond, I did.
Oh, Mr.
slip in,
Clayton,
and
go ahead.
For some reason, I got lost. Over here, sir. The mayor's office.
Oh, hello there.
My question is, would you be willing to serve on the public transportation advisory board when a seat comes available? Because somebody with your energy would be very welcome on that board. Or I'm not sure whether it's a board or commission, but it's an advisory role. We're always looking for people willing to spend time, and I'm wondering if you'd be willing.
Well, if you think I can actually make a difference.
You know, my experience in life is read exactly what he wants you to do before you promise anything.
Yeah, in all seriousness, you know, I did this effort because I really thought it would make a difference. I'd have to look at that advisory board and see if, in my opinion, me being on it could drive change.
Well, all I can say, and with full deference to Ms. Osiander's comments about look at the commission, you certainly would want to do that before you sign up. But if people have concerns like yours, don't choose to participate, and somebody that has your energy, don't choose to participate in the commissions that give advice to the Assembly, it makes it very hard for those commissions to have the voice of individuals like you if you don't take the time to volunteer and be heard. Being heard doesn't mean that you get on the commission and necessarily have everyone agree with you. But if you're not there offering your opinion, it makes it difficult to have a broad view from the entire community heard on those commissions. So I will look to see whether there may be a seat soon. If you're interested, I will do everything I can to put you on that commission sooner than later because I think you have a lot to offer.
Understood. I'll consider it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Selkirk?
I would just encourage the mayor to listen to that board. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Peterson.
How should I distribute these?
You can bring it to us, and the clerk will take care of distributing them. Thank you very much for coming. Okay. Let's see. We have a single new public hearing item, 14A. Ordinance AO, pardon me? Oh, I apologize. Okay. A motion would be in order for 11B, notice of reconsideration. Could I move it? I can move it. Okay. Mr. Coffey, do you want to change chairs?
No, that's fine. Ms. Drummond?
Yes, Mr. Coffey. I'd like to move notice of reconsideration of Resolution AR 2008-253.
Discussion?
I asked for reconsideration for this item. I was a kind of a reluctant yes vote, which allowed me to ask for reconsideration, and I wasn't quite sure why I was so reluctant. But the next day, I got showered with emails and calls from constituents and others in the community who felt that they were bypassed in the public hearing process on this item. And even though the body might choose not to reconsider this item, I did want to alert them to the fact that there was some misinformation given out that we were not going to take up this item last week and instead wait until the 28th. So a number of people stayed home that evening and did not come out to testify. I also wanted to let the public know that the Public Safety Committee will be holding a committee meeting at which they will take public testimony this Thursday at 6 p.m. in these chambers from 6 to 8. And any of those comments will be directed to the administration and to the Assembly to hopefully have an influence on this process. I know that Ms. Handyside has a report to make to us if we're willing to listen now on the progress on this item.
Well, let's get the motion to reconsider done first. Mr. Gutierrez, then Ms. Johnston, Mr. Flynn, Ms. Selkirk, Ms. Osiander. Mr. Gutierrez?
Actually, thank you. I was just going to talk about the Thursday meeting, and Mr. Drummond already did that.
Ms. Johnston?
I can wait until after Ms. Handyside.
No.
Okay.
We're going to decide whether it's going to be reconsidered.
I am not in favor of reconsideration. I've spent a lot of time with constituents and others, emails, phones. In fact, one very fervent person who is against the resolution ended up in our discussion saying that I was much too logical to be a political servant. So I really feel that once people read this, that they were much more comfortable. It's a start. It's a process. It's going to be somebody who is responsible to work within the city as far as wildlife management. And this is not. I made a couple of additions to it to take away some issues with state statute, and I think it's just a very good start, and I think we should let it go.
Ms. Selkirk, Dr. Selkirk.
I came in that last meeting under the impression that this was going to be postponed, and I supported it, and I'm going to support the reconsideration tonight. But I am comfortable coming back to this motion, and I'm comfortable with the officer. I'm comfortable with many, many parts of this. Actually, what we passed. What I do feel is that there's some additional pieces that could be added to strengthen it, and had it not been brought before us for reconsideration, I would have simply brought an additional ordinance forward. But in light of the fact that it's here, I'm comfortable with the body of it, and I'm happy to reconsider it and plan to I would like to, I guess I'm curious if we can reconsider it right now, then can we, how does it work? Do we vote on it? We vote it down tonight, or can we postpone it and?
You can, any one of those things. If the motion to reconsider passes, it's in front of us.
So
we could then move to postpone, we could move to approve, we could do whatever.
That would be my intention. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Oceander.
As I understand it, the main rationale for the motion to reconsider is that a member of the administration informed Department of Fish and Game and apparently some other people that there would not be a vote. I'm a little bit confounded about that because I informed people there would be a vote. The item has been on our agenda since October. It had a full committee hearing. We got a report back on the committee hearing. I've been talking about this, I know as Mr. Starr has been talking about this with people for quite a while. We amended a resolution that basically, I believe, is generic enough to give the administration a chance to craft a proposal that they're comfortable with. My understanding of this is that we are going to communicate and will continue to communicate fully with the state. We need somebody who cross-references solid waste services, and talks with the police about a threat zone, talks with the parks about how to handle situation, and that person absolutely should confer with the experts who are in the state Department of Fish and Game. What I'm envisioning is we'll get something from the administration that talks about how they think that should be done. Then there'll be another public hearing. We'll still have to fund this thing. I don't see that it's accomplishing anything to go backwards when it's basically a fairly generic resolution that was passed. The substitute, which I did read, frankly to me didn't contain much that was new. I've been talking, as some other members of this body have, with people who have concerns and thoughts about bear management for months now. And in fact, if you look at that Title 21 segment that was just introduced, read the section on stream protection and wildlife corridors, because we did look at the bear report and incorporate a lot of that. I don't think that this is closing any door. This is just a step. I see nothing to be accomplished by revisiting a small step in this ongoing process.
Mr. Birch, then Mr. Flynn. Mr. Birch.
I would urge a no vote on reconsideration. You know, we dealt with this last week, and we actually had some discussion on why do we always do those immediate reconsideration things, and it's precisely for this type of, this type of consideration. Is that this is the body has given due deliberation to this subject. It was modified appropriately at the last outing. It's been under consideration for 6 months. Spring is here. We need to move forward with this, and I would urge a no vote on reconsideration. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. Is it appropriate to ask a question from the audience at this time, or
No.
Is not? No. Okay. Okay, then I have nothing to say.
We'll do all that if we get to reconsideration.
Thank you.
All right. There's no one else in the queue. Please, Madam Clerk, if you could set up, or Madam Chair, if you could set up the vote. A yes vote reconsiders, a no vote does not.
Mr. Birch? There.
That item fails 5-5. It will not be reconsidered. Madam Chair, I return the chair to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coffey. Again, the Public Safety Committee meeting will happen on Thursday as scheduled in this room, and public testimony is very welcome.
Madam Chair?
Dr. Selkirk.
I understand that I was not at is this the bear report that came from the bear committee that was just handed out? Could the administration also provide the assembly with the bear report? And I think that the planning department has it. Could we also get the bear report from the bear committee between now and our next meeting, because actually I think that there's an opportunity to come back with some partner recommendations that will work really nicely with what was just passed.
Thank you for asking for that, Dr. Selcraig. Ms. Handyside?
Yes, we can provide that if that's.
Okay, thank you. Also, I did look in my Title 21 materials, and I couldn't find that BEAR report, Ms. Osiander, so I appreciate you. Is that the one that Ms. Selcraig just asked for a new copy of? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair?
Ms. Handyside, go ahead.
May I request kind of the mechanism that you'd like that information to be brought back to you? Or shall I just email that to you, or is there something more official that you're requesting? And I'm also would like just further direction on the necessity of the work session on Friday. Is that no longer necessary?
Ms. Osiander?
Ms. Handyside, I shared with some Assembly members a document that we've been using in our committee for a while. It's called Guidelines for Maintaining Bear Habitat while Reducing Bear-Human Conflicts in the Municipality of Anchorage and Chugach State Park. It was you can get this from Erica McConnell in planning staff. They indicated they wanted a copy. I hesitated to do that because it's multiple pages and I didn't want to kill my copier. And there's some color on the back.
Okay.
This was created, it's a little dated. It's created in 2004. There's also the Living with Wildlife document, which I think would be very helpful if people haven't read it. I assumed everybody'd read it.
I'll make that available. I'll pass it on to the clerk then.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Mr. Starr?
I just looked at this. This appears to be a website page off of muni.org, the front cover of this. Is that in fact true?
It is a page that is going to be available. We had hoped, or we had planned, to introduce that to you at the work session on Friday and just get your input and then to launch it next week. But it is prepared to go and is sound as is.
Great. Thanks for doing that.
Sure.
Okay, and did I hear that a work session on Friday to have the administration give us progress report would be acceptable to the body? Okay, I don't see any objection. We'll announce the work session at the end of the meeting. Yes, Dr. Selcraig.
Seems to me, I'm unclear, if we just get these documents, is there something else going on besides the documents?
Yes, Ms. Handyside has been working diligently.
Through the chair, there are a number of activities that are happening. They are, for the most part, summarized in the document. So if you could read the document, that would be the majority of what we would go over at the work session.
I'm very interested in this, but I mean, there's a lot of information out there, and it just seems to me, and it seems maybe this is just a little premature. Are we bringing forward another resolution based on this information?
Through the chair, no, ma'am.
So why don't we? I'd be happy to maybe work with you on maybe the next step that has to do with land use or those other things. And why don't we save the work session until we have something for the body to actually look at it that we might be acting on?
I'll defer to the body, but would be happy to do so.
Okay, Mr. Coffey, and then Mr. Starr.
Madam Chair, in the absence of a budget situation that we've just going to do 2.5 hours of work session on, and with an effort to get to a either consensus or real close to consensus as a result, my preference would be to focus on the budget items, and we can deal with the bear situation after the administration has perhaps fleshed it out a little bit and we've got something that they want us to do, or like an appropriation for how we're going to hire this fellow or something like that. Thank you. Well, I don't care about that, but I'm just thinking about the work session that involves all of us. So I would request that we not do it right now, although I certainly don't have a problem with doing it sometime in the near future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Coffey. Mr. Starr.
Yeah, I concur, especially if there's a public meeting that you're, on Thursday, I think. So if your summary comments and all that, I just as soon wait to see, let the administration catch up from the resolution actions and push it off to the future with some other intention, especially on budget day. That's
okay,
primary.
That's fine. It sounds like we can consider a work session on bears in the future and not this Friday. All right? Okay, let's move on. Item 14A is before us, a new public hearing. Ordinance AO 2009-39, an ordinance of the Anchorage Assembly amending the zoning map and providing for the zoning of approximately 13.8 acres from R1A, single-family residential district, to R4SL, multiple-family residential district with special limitations for tracts B1 and B2 Green subdivision. I will skip the legal description. It is generally located on the north side of O'Malley Road between Lake Otis Parkway and Independence Drive. It's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 157-2009. The public hearing on this item is now open. Anyone present wishing to be heard on this item, please come forward. Anyone at all? Yes, ma'am. Come forward and speak to us. It's my neighbor. I haven't seen her in a long time.
Hi. My name is Maureen Chandler, and I live...
Pull the mic down, thank you.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I live just behind this area that they're considering for rezoning. As it stands now, it's a very nice neighborhood. I'm not saying that this addition would change that, but I'm concerned about the traffic in the face of the neighborhood. The largest issue for me is there is a wetlands right next door to my home. The new project that would go in, they are talking about drainage in the planning analysis. They discussed drainage issues in a number of different places. They would drain into the wetlands, and currently the wetlands overflow onto Ridgemont Drive and Independence Drive. So my major concern is with 228 new units, the overflow for this wetlands is going to be unbearable. It backs up into my yard now, and I actually have some photographs if anyone is interested in seeing them.
Yes, if you could bring them forward, we'll pass them along the table. Thank you.
So for me, the biggest issues would be the quality of the neighborhood, and then, of course, the drainage issues, which are currently not good and would only get worse with this.
Okay. Any questions for the speaker?
Yes.
Mr. Coffey, go ahead.
Where are the I've got this map. I mean, and it shows to the north. It faces on O'Malley. Then to the north, it goes into a R3SL zone, Ridgemont, and those streets. Where is the wetlands you're referring to?
They're at the end of, would be at the northwest corner of the proposed development.
And do you know what they're classified as? A, B, or C?
It's referenced in this planning as just as wetlands, so I don't know what they're classified as.
All right, well, I'll ask Mr. Weaver when the time comes. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Selcraig, a question for the speaker.
Could you give me could you state again what subdivision you're in?
I'm in Ridgemont.
You're on Ridgemont.
Right.
And so you will back up against this, and then there's kind of, the way your development is designed is that there's wetlands between you and the proposed development.
Correct.
And is there wetlands to the east as well of your property?
There are wetlands to the west and south of my property.
Okay, south of your property. Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else wishing to be heard on this item, please come forward. Anyone else?
I want to know what
Welcome, sir. Tell us who you are. You have 3 minutes.
My name's Harold Green, and I'm the person that's the developer of this project. And I thought it'd be appropriate for me to come forward and be available for any questions or concerns the municipality has. The Planning and Zoning Commission, we've worked on this project now for almost 3 years. In January, after thorough analysis by, I don't know whether it's 24 or close to it, different departments and agencies, and input from the community, the Planning and Zoning voted unanimously in favor of of this rezone because it is in the best interest of Anchorage. As to some of the concerns you may hear today, in the resolution, I don't know if that's attached, but the resolution that the Planning and Zoning Commission had passed, item 7 specifically talks about a site plan review process such that these type of concerns will be addressed. We've already addressed some of them, and we're not done with the project because we have the site plan review to further get community input into the project. I'm available if anyone has questions or concerns to address.
Thank you, sir. There are a number of questions for you. Ms. Johnston.
Yes, as far as the drainage, have you been watching the current drainage that goes down to Richmond? Have you just through the years?
Actually, I'm very familiar with it.
And what do you see, I mean, just currently, how could that be addressed? Or?
Well, what I believe she's talking about are Class C wetlands. We're not building into wetlands. We're not changing the drainage. We're not adding to it.
Right.
We're actually going to be putting in a city water and city sewer on this property, such that, and we're not adding to the amount of drainage.
No, except when you have, and I have read all of this, and I feel that you put a lot of work and effort into this, and I agree with the site plan review, but whenever you replace land or dirt with pavement, then you do have a runoff situation. And so so you're going to address as far as the runoff from your development so it doesn't go back down onto this, add to these wetlands. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct, but also you'll notice we have a lot of green area in this development. I mean, one choice is to build a number of duplexes, which is how it's currently zoned, and have it almost entirely covered with pavement and streets. What we have is some nice buildings with underground parking for each unit. So we have actually much less pavement than in a typical subdivision. And all of these plans have been, with the city for almost 2 years, have changed a little bit. We added additional land in this project. And again, we do have the site plan review process to address any further concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Green, for coming down. I was just looking at the traffic pattern. It appears you're going to have an ingress and egress off of O'Malley and off Independence, but not on the Lake Otis. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And are there traffic restrictions for either of those locations? For example, if you're heading east on O'Malley, will you be able to access, or you have to turn on Independence Drive and then to access?
Okay, that's O'Malley Road is State of Alaska Road.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. And Independence is a municipality of Anchorage Road. It's not complete, even though Ridgemont was promised to have it done years ago with that subdivision. The type of configurations, we have done a TIA, traffic impact analysis, that's, I can't remember if it's 80 pages long. It's thick. It's a half-inch thick. One thing, I'm just going by recollection now here on the spot, but my understanding was there was a proposal that at the upper, we'll call it, there's no access to this off of Lake Otis. If you were going south on Lake Otis and then you took a right-hand turn, so you're headed west on O'Malley, the first road that's already there now, you would have a right turn in only and a right turn out. So nobody could turn to go left uphill if they were leaving the subdivision.
Nobody could turn left into the subdivision.
Into the traffic and to go uphill. So you wouldn't have people trying to jump across the traffic coming down the hillside.
In other words, if you're approaching from the east or you want to go east, you got to go to Independence Drive and access from there.
That's right.
Thank you. That's all I need.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Birch.
Well, thank you for coming down to testify, and thank you for your message earlier this afternoon. A couple of questions, and I think the drainage, and certainly in South Anchorage, drainage in the hillside is always a key issue, and usually it's the person downhill from the drainage or from the project that has the principal concern. We do have some pictures showing areas that are fairly well inundated, which I assume are the wetlands areas. Are you looking at bringing in a fair amount of fill in the actual petition area, the yellow area here?
Let me just make sure I'm looking at the same area.
Yeah.
If I brought that.
And just as a follow-up, the I think it's identified as R. Did you say you're looking at duplexes in there under current zoning? Because I think it's currently zoned R1A, which is a single-family residence.
Well, there's single-family zero lot line is what some of the units would be as an alternate plan.
Oh, okay.
Just like over by Ridgemont, some of those are single families spaced about 10 feet apart, and others are zero lot line.
Okay, all within the R1 zoning?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess the concern that I've heard recently is basically, as Ms. Johnston pointed out, is a drainage issue and how that might be addressed. Now, would there be a storm drain that would cause that area to be, basically to protect the existing homeowners in the neighborhood?
Well, absolutely. There's protection for. We don't want a project that doesn't work. That sounds like litigation later. And that's always more expensive than addressing it and getting it done right in the first instance. As to drainage, there's a couple issues. First of all, Independence Drive is now being worked on again, let's put it like that. So they can hook up to O'Malley Road and coordinate with the estate. That kind of ties in with the drainage because it's down at that Independence corner. That would be the northwest corner, is the general flow of all the water off the hillside that comes that way. We're not going to concentrate any flow of water so that it will disturb anybody. If you go out there during the dry season, it's not like a river down there. On the other hand, I'm not looking at the map you are because I left it back in my pack, but if you look at it just on the other side of Independence, just west of Independence is a municipality parcel. And we haven't reached any agreement, but we've talked about if there's any, storm that arises in drainage, well, there's a location to accept additional water if we have an act of God that creates a storm like that.
Okay.
We'll be using Anchorage water and wastewater, for both the water for folks to drink and also for the wastewater, and that will all be done in an appropriate manner through their process.
Great. And then lastly, through the chair, on the Independence Drive, I know that was going to be constructed, and I know that there's a financial shortage, and then I know the state's looking at rebuilding O'Malley. So is part of this project, is that going to ensure the actual completion of that road to provide that point of access then?
Well, two things. I would urge the municipality to connect up Independence Road before the state gets started on their actual building. I think there may be financial benefits to the city to do so. But secondly, this project is conditioned. It's in phases, and we need to have Independence completed. I mean, the people of Ridgemont were supposed to have it completed, I think, in 2002. And even if it's not as large and as fancy as everybody might want in the long run, it seems to me like a good idea to get it completed, because we can't build out this project without Independence being completed, and we'd like to see it done right.
I would agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. Dr. Selcraig.
Thank you. It's actually, I think you've spent real time and thought in putting together a good project. I do have some questions about the drainage issues, partly because I have experience in my part of town with developments that moved, actually impacted drainage areas and have impacted adjacent neighborhoods. And so I was looking at your report, and it says here hydraulic modeling will be done for the final drainage analysis. Has that hydraulic modeling been done?
Dave Grenier with Land Tech and Triad Engineering are the gentlemen who are doing that. I'm not an engineer.
Right, but that process is underway. In other words, the modeling is going on.
It is underway, and I know that there were some meetings to be scheduled or actually scheduled with Anchorage Water and wastewater, and the drainage is all part of the water and the wastewater. I know they've done a topography study of the land.
Right, and also the adjacent land around it, in terms of which way the water's going to flow.
They have done that.
And then the runoff, it says runoff will be metered and allowed to enter the Class C wetlands, which are those wetlands that the person who testified before you lives next to. So, in those pictures that we have appear to be the wetlands between, kind of at the edge of your property and at the back of her property. So I guess it's really incumbent upon the city's review, and I guess I can ask my questions to him at that time, Mr. Weaver at that time, in terms of making sure that everything you do is done in a manner that actually doesn't result in negative impacts on the adjacent properties. And, I'm sure that it can be addressed, but it definitely needs to be. I live near an area that was disrupted, and the drainage is running into neighborhoods 6 and 7 blocks away. So, I know that if we don't do it right, it can be pretty messy.
It will be done right, but not only that, there will continue to be what some people have referred to as the green belt. Others, including the Corps of Engineers, identify it as a wetlands area. We're not disturbing that.
But if you fill it,
well, we're not
overfill it, because you are going to be draining into it.
Well, it drains into it right now.
Okay.
That's what my point was. It's the drainage pattern is not going to change. We're not going to concentrate the water and pour it in all at one direction.
But your document does say that you'll be allowing runoff to enter to the Class C wetlands. So you are going to be at some level doing...
But the Class C wetlands are over adjacent to Independence Drive. They're not adjacent to these Ridgemont property.
Thank you.
I'm looking at this map, and that's at the northwest corner, and right at the northwest corner, there is no Ridgemont. There's a space there between that and when Ridgemont begins.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Selkirk. Mr. Coffey.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Green. Nice to see you again. I note the TIA and the traffic impact analysis, the hydrology study, the wetlands mitigation study. One of my concerns was this. And I understand why you can't do the hydrological study until your site plan has been reviewed and approved. It's cart before the horse kind of thing. But as part of the site plan review, would it be appropriate to require that study be submitted to, because you're going through a public site plan review by the department, and then you're having a public hearing site plan review by planning and zoning. If there's any issues that would come up relative to drainage, then that might be the time when they could be addressed. And I don't know if I'm off base or not, but maybe you've got someone here who knows.
Yes, I do. This is Mr. Hoffman with Land Tech, who's assisted us on this.
Welcome. So you get my question, and what's happening more and more that I've seen, and then I've had to, for constituents, address the problems after they've been found to exist. So what I think we'd like to do is avoid them.
So my name is Tony Hoffman. I work with Land Tech, and we're the preparers of all the documents and such for Harold, and I've been doing the preliminary site plans that you've seen. Now, the question about the drainage is a really good question. You have to understand that what we have is a concept site plan. Part of the rezone resolution is that one of the conditions is we are going to go back for a full site plan review again in front of planning and zoning. At that time, we will have final details, as in building placement, drainage calculations that are going to be reviewed by project management engineering and the wetland management people of the municipality. Now, the idea, of course, is that we have negative impact to the wetlands, but there's always going to be some impact to them. There is now, but our goal is to meet all the guidelines of the municipality drainage impact analysis. Now, as far as the TIA and all those other issues, go ahead.
I'm not worried about the TIA. I saw it, I read it, I don't have any issues with it. I was worried about the drainage, as Dr. Selkray was.
And the drainage is an issue, I can tell you from personal experience with planning now that we are under some new guidelines as far as the DCM, Design Criteria Manual, that the municipality project management engineering is holding us to. So they are very closely looking at all the impacts that we're putting into the wetlands as far as drainage, and any off-site drainage is part of that review by PM&E.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Dr. Selkirk, another comment?
I'm just wondering, is the hydraulic study done after you've done, at what point are you going to do the hydraulic study?
The final hydraulic study will be performed as part of the final site plan review and the PM&E review.
So it would be appropriate for us to say that should be reviewed?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. And I can tell you from personal experience, we won't get by with anything.
Okay, thank you. I see no further questions for this gentleman. Any further questions? Or for Mr. Green? Okay, seeing none, thank you both very much for coming and shedding some light. What is, anyone else wishing to be heard on this item? Please come forward. Sir, come on forward. Speak to us. Welcome. Please tell us who you are, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Gary Waltman. I live at 1950 Commodore Drive. Commodore Drive is immediately west of the wetlands that Mr. Green is referring to. I did attend a previous zoning hearing on this several months ago, and at that time I don't remember there being any discussion of drainage going into that wetlands. My understanding is that wetlands is actually city-owned property currently being considered for use as a city park. There weren't any dates or any specifications about what type of park that would be, but I guess I would question the use of a city park being used as a drainage area. My other concern in hearing this evening is that currently my property backs up to that wetlands area, and not only myself but other houses in the neighborhood are starting to experience some sinkage of the ground, and we've been told by a number of people that it's because there's underwater, I don't know what they're referred to, but kind of underground streams that are causing that ground to sink. And I would think that any additional drainage being fed into that property could significantly impact our properties.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for this gentleman? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming.
Okay.
I appreciate your concerns.
Okay. And I have one other question. I don't know how long this testimony will continue. I do have a friend that also lives on Ridgemont that wasn't able to get out of work. He's on his way now, and I just wondered how long.
How many more people are here to testify on this item in the audience? Would you please raise your hands? At least you have at least 6 minutes plus questions for these folks, sir, so tell them to hurry.
Okay.
But not break any traffic laws. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next person wishing to be heard, please come forward. Welcome. Pull the microphone down and speak right into it, get right up close to it, and tell us who you are.
Okay. My name is Norma Slattenwitcher, and I live on Ridge Park Drive, and it's up a little ways from where the water is. But you're speaking about drainage, and I can already see there's lakes down there that have to be frequently drained. because they don't flow through across O'Malley. That is a consideration of myself and neighbors. Also, the traffic pattern. Neither Independence nor O'Malley, I don't think should be burdened with as much traffic as this proposal would add to it. I would like to have some of that stuff reconsidered.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Any questions for this speaker? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for coming. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Welcome.
Hi, my name is Gina Park. I don't have anything officially prepared. I just heard about this last night. But I live on the very first subdivision, the zero lot line property, once you enter Ridgemont from Lake Otis. And from the map that we were given of the petition site and of the buildings, there it looks like they're proposing for one directly behind our property. And not only is the drainage an issue, but there's going to be an increase of noise, an increase of traffic, our view is going to be obstructed. And what I'm hearing is that they're planning on making these buildings about 4 to 5 floors high. That will allow them to directly look into our living area, and that is one of my biggest concerns, is our privacy will be constricted by these buildings because levels 3, 4, and 5 can all look directly into our building. And I don't know if you guys have the same, you probably do, maps of the layout they've got, and a lot of the other buildings are angled in a different direction. That still allows them to look into the other buildings continuously down Ridgemont Road. And I personally, that is one of the biggest issues, aside from everything else. And I don't know if it's officially a wetland, but we've got one of those little areas where there's drainage in there. And unfortunately, it continues through our backyards down Ridgemont Road, and it is clogged up constantly. We've contacted the municipality several times to help us keep it clean and drained, and for years we have had nothing happen. So my family and I literally have to go in there and unclog all this. It's absolutely filthy. It gets thick and it's just mossy and really not very something you want to live by. So every summer we take our time to drain all that out, to unplug anything, and kids come and block it with rocks. I don't know if they find that humorous or what, but things happen and we have to take care of that. And if there's going to be an excess amount of drainage continuously flowing, this is literally just a few feet next to our property. And that is also a major concern, but again, the privacy issue, I would say, is one of the biggest concerns. If it's going to be that high, I do not feel comfortable to leave that, and we've got big windows in the back of our home, which is where these buildings would be facing. And that's the only source of sunlight that we get into the living room, and I don't really want to close it up because of these people possibly looking into our living area. But again, that is one of the major concerns that we have decided we want to bring to your attention.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I have several questions for you. Ms. Osiander.
Is your property...
Microphone, Ms. Osiander, please.
It was on. Is your property on the Independence side of Ridgemont or on the Lake Otis side of Ridgemont?
It's perpendicular to Lake Otis. Ridgemont is perpendicular to Lake Otis, and it's on the left-hand side. The very first building.
Off Lake Otis?
Yes. So.
Okay, that helps me. It's on the eastern side of Ridgemont.
Yes. I'm sorry? Yes.
Right, okay. I was struck by your 5 or 6 story comment because as I read this, there's a height limitation on these buildings.
Oh,
and I wondered if you were aware of that. It says that on the western side, which is not your side, the height shall not exceed 55 feet, and on the other side, it shall not exceed 41 feet. Now, I'm going to ask Mr. Weaver later, but I think 3 stories is about 45. So I don't know where you got the 5 or 6 stories. Were you presented some other information?
Yeah, there is a letter here. I did not receive this personally, but it did come to our home. It says, "Hello, Ridgemont neighbor. I want to make sure you're aware of the plans, etc." Let me see what it says. There is a request by the developer to change the zoning of this lot to allow the building of complex containing 221 apartments and condos and parking spaces for 450 vehicles. This development consists of multiple buildings that will be as high as 5 stories. This is tall enough to obstruct your views to the south and allow the tenants of the upper floors of those buildings to look into your living areas of your home.
I think there was a little bit of an exaggeration in that letter, but we'll try to pin that down with Mr. Weaver later on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Osiander. Mr. Coffey, a question.
Do you know how far your home is from the property line of the O'Malley?
Not by measurement, no, but
As I look at the map, it appears to be 100 feet or more, plus the setback on the properties proposed for development in the same relative distance in the approximately 100 feet.
well, my concern is all we have in our backyard are woods at this point, and if they are making space available for 450 cars, I assume they would probably be cutting down a lot of it, even with the underground parking. If that's the case, if it is in fact 5 stories high, and there is nothing in between the 2 buildings, they still have the availability to view into our living areas.
You're aware they need to go to P&Z and have a public site plan review where they bring their final plans in.
Right, and I'm not sure exactly how that process works, but is it considered like the privacy of the current homes there when they do the site
That's up
plan
to the
review?
Planning and Zoning Commission, of course, but it's what they're questioning here is to allow them to go forward to that process by permitting the appropriate zoning that would allow them to do the type of development they're talking about, whether they're required to do it at 3 stories or 55 feet or 41 feet or any other things would be subject to that. Whether they will be able to clear and to what degree, that's another question. They're required by this to have parking in the building for the residents. So, and if you look at the existing original site plan drawings, which are subject to review, the parking is allocated by building. But I was concerned, what I've heard tonight so far predominantly for me is the drainage issues.
Right.
And so is there anything about what you know or have heard tonight that would cause you concerns relative to that?
If, again, I'm not very aware of how the drainage system would work with these new complexes. I do know what wetlands that they have spoken of previously, and I'm not sure if it's the same system because we do have a hill down Ridgemont. We live at the very top of that hill, but we still get that drainage issue in that little area next to our personal property. But if it does affect that, yeah, I am definitely concerned. But again, I haven't had time to do my research to see if that would be affected.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions for this speaker? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming. And do keep an eye on the planning and zoning process. You will be able to testify to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Okay, anyone else wishing to be heard on this item, please come forward. Come forward. You're welcome to line up behind her if you like. There seems to be lots of you. Hi, tell us who you are. Bring the microphone right up to close to your mouth.
Good evening. My name is DJ Moberly. I live on Valley Park Drive. Thank you so much for allowing us this time to express our concerns. I think I am with a lot of the neighborhood people who are here tonight concerned about quite a few things. Drainage, definitely one of them, especially with the other concerns of various neighborhoods throughout Anchorage, especially with breakup happening and such. My specific concern is more around traffic. I've recently moved to Anchorage about a year and a half ago, coming from multiple cities, seeing how their layouts are. The traffic patterns, definitely in neighborhoods, can contribute to a lot of problems just on the main thoroughfares. So if we don't have appropriate access or appropriate roads around the neighborhoods, that also causes problems getting out to work and coming home. So I'm hoping with the future plans that they can make the roads accessible for this larger volume of people who might be living in this area with this new complex. I think all of us have a little of a gut reaction anytime we hear, oh, something's going to change. I think it could bring a lot as far as development for the area, as far as the businesses in the neighborhood, bring more people in, but I want to make sure that we have the access needed to not impede travel any more than it is. That is a huge concern, and I'm hoping you're taking that into account.
Thank you, Ms. Moberly. Some of the Assembly members have questions for you. Ms. Osiander.
Trying to figure out where you live in relation to this. I don't have Valley View on this map.
Valley Park Drive.
Ms. Osiander, it's about 4 pages in on the document, Exhibit A.
021.
And it's Valley Park is about 3 blocks north of this.
Our street is not currently fully developed yet ourselves, but there will be single-family units, of course, with the current zoning.
So, I'm sorry.
Oh,
so
go ahead.
Do you use Independence then?
Yes, as much as possible, just because it allows us another access road, especially during the winter, when it's super slippery going up those hills. There's a monstrous curve in our neighborhood, and so that Independence access is a huge point that we...
Rather than Lake Otis?
Rather than Lake Otis.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Coffey, a question for the speaker.
You know, there's a 68-page traffic impact analysis that came to us.
Yes, I read over it last night.
I mean, the reason that these are required for significant developments is because of the concerns over traffic. And the conclusions in here, I'm not sure there's anybody on this board except maybe Mr. Birch, who's an engineer, who might know whether or not to do it. So we take the conclusions from the experts and generally abide by them. Is there anything about that you find to be erroneous or out of line?
Not out of line. What I'm finding is that the plans currently for the development of the property says to be 3 to 7 years out. Is that correct? Or did I misread that?
It's a phased development, yes.
It's a phased development. With that, I'm hoping that the city is also managing fundage appropriately to address these impacted areas with increasing street volume, things like that. It looks as though the plans are in place for possibly 2010 or 2012. My memory doesn't always serve me the best. But I'm wanting to make sure that as this property is developed, if it is, there are also lands just across the street that if rezoning happens to take place, there will be a large influx of people then too. I want to make sure we're not reacting to the problem, but we're looking ahead and making sure the city budget can meet the needs of the people in the area if the development is meeting the needs of the city to get approved.
Thank you. Any more questions for the speaker? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for coming, Ms. Moberly. Okay, anyone else wishing to be heard, please come forward. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Barnes. I'm a resident there in the Ridgemont subdivision. I've been there since 2002. I live to, I guess it would be the north of this area in question, right off of Lake Otis. And as being a resident there for the last 7 years, I was in what was the original phase of the 4-phase development in the Spinelli Ridgemont homeowners area. So I witnessed to the development of that area when it was only phase 1 and expanding to phase 2 and 3, et cetera. It is on a bog area. Unfortunately, with witnessing how the development happened in phase 2, it was
a lot of construction of multiple fill for the entire summer whenever these projects would occur. So from an impact, I know an incredible amount of fill had to be put on that bog area, that wetland area, to bring it up to where it could be supported to expand that phase 2, phase 3, et cetera. Or excuse me, phase 3. What's going on now is phase 4, which backs up to the area you're talking about now, adjacent to that boggy wetland area. It is a concern, the drainage. I'm very concerned in how it's going to change from here. The notification that I got was off the website, but we never received any of the residents in our neighborhood didn't receive any notice about this. I think it said 109 notices have been mailed out around December 2008. The 109 did not include the 166 homeowners in Ridgemont, which is adjacent to this development area. So I was curious about the process on that, on why we were not notified. I know it's our job to research these things, and we will be doing so as part of the Ridgemont homeowners there, and we'll stay actively involved. But I was just curious about the process on why there was not a notification beyond that area. As far as what's happening now in Phase 4 development, from what I understand, they've had to put a halt to Phase 4 development because they've struck water on this area that's adjacent to this area in question. They've, I think, pulled out their large equipment and stopped construction until further studies can be done. So that's where we are with what's going on Valley Park, which is right adjacent to the area we're talking about. So I think that's all. I just wanted to just mention that it is a concern as far as drainage and where that drainage is going to go, what system it's being flowed into, and how that's going to progress. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Dr. Selcraig. Okay, we'll skip that question. Okay, thank you very much for coming, ma'am.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Anyone else wishing to be heard on this item, please come forward.
Hello. Thank you. My name is Tim Manwaring, and I also live in the Ridgemont Drive, which is the road directly adjacent to the parcel in question. I wanted to say that I testified originally at the council hearing, or whatever the previous hearings were, and I wanted to make sure that you folks understand that I am not opposed to responsible development. In fact, I think the area in question should be developed, but I was overwhelmed with the scope and the size of the project when I saw it at first, and so that's basically my concerns. I do have a concern about the heights, and I also am the gentleman who wrote the letter for the young lady who spoke earlier about 5 stories high. I got that from the 4 stories planned with the underneath parking, and read that to assume to be 5 stories. As you are quite aware, I believe, is if without changing the zoning for that parcel, there would be substantially less buildings allowed to be built, a lot less buildings. I'm not sure. At one time I heard the number 16. I don't know if that's completely accurate or not. However, I do know that 221 units is a lot, and I know that the 4 stories, assume it's limited to 4 stories with underneath parking, is quite a bit higher than would have been allowed on, or would be allowed on the current zoning. And I would encourage you to require the developer to reduce the height of those buildings. One of my concerns is visual impact. And I know for a fact, since I live probably as closest to anyone to this development, that a 4-story building built directly across from me will put that top levels above the tree line and looking into the back of our area. And I think that's too tall. I also have concerns with the number of buildings and the impact that all those residents could have on traffic. I know the traffic study has been done. I've read it. I don't see anything glaring about it, but I also know a little bit about the reality of that area. And I know that current plans call for right turn only access or exits from that area. And I know that when Independence Drive is pushed through to O'Malley, which is on the plan in the future, that if people can only turn right out of this development, that they will naturally go down Independence Park and take the first or one of the first accesses back onto Lake Otis, which is the street I live on. Richmont is the first available street where they could go up the hill and make a left-hand turn to head north on Lake Otis.
Okay, thank you, sir. We have a question. Mr. Coffey has a question for you.
Did you read the Planning and Zoning Commission findings?
I did.
Okay. So the things you're talking about, they also talked about them.
They were, I think lots of things were addressed in there, yes?
Yeah, and so their approach to the answers to those questions seemed to be continued public involvement, public site plan review, and so on and so forth. So I guess my question is, when we have the comprehensive plan that indicates this area is particularly to be higher density than what the R1A would allow, so they're complying with that requirement, and then they're saying because it is of an order of magnitude greater than what has already occurred in there, although townhouse development is fairly high density too, as you know. How else should they handle this except through the public site plan review and, you know, when they've come in with their final approaches? And if we try to make judgments on that tonight, before all the plans and specifications are drawn, we could go down the wrong road. And wouldn't we be better to say, rezone it okay, but take all these things they've considered, including drainage, including density, including height, and address them in a public site plan review? Why would that be a wrong thing to do?
That wouldn't be wrong. I'm sure that's the appropriate thing to do. And quite honestly, I was under the impression that this was the last meeting in making the decision on what would be built in this area. So I didn't understand that. But I will take any opportunity to speak publicly and before you and anyone else to let my concerns be known. And so that's why I'm here. But my impression was once the zoning was allowed to be changed, that at that point, that it was changed. And I didn't know what kind of restrictions could be put on the builder after that time.
They indicated here in finding number 10 that they don't want anything that R4 would permit to be built. They want to make it R4 so some things can be built, but then all of these conditions, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, and so on, will require all of these issues that you bring forward to be addressed once the petitioner brings in a site plan. Here's where my building's going to sit, here how tall it is, here's the parking, here's this, that, and the other stuff. And so I think that's a good way to go myself, and this isn't the final situation. So
okay, well, obviously I don't have all my facts straight, and I believe that the site plan that we were giving in previous meetings, I thought that was the site plan.
Well, this is a real long thing, and we deal with rezoning all the time. I certainly don't expect the public to get into the depth that we have. I heard you say you weren't opposed to development, and I thought responsible development would require the public site plan review, where you can come in and the lady who testified about the view into her bedroom and et cetera, can all be addressed at that time, and I think that's appropriate. I thank you, sir.
Sorry, Dr. Selkirk.
Well, I concur with Mr. Coffey, but I do think that actually it's good that you're here tonight, because there are things in the Planning and Zoning Commission's determination that imply what can be done on that property that we've heard people address. For example, they do say that height shall not exceed 55 feet, which really tells the planning department that it's okay with the planning department, it's okay with now with us and with the Planning Commission that they go ahead and build buildings to that height. So I think it's appropriate tonight for us to deliberate on some of the constraints that we've looked at here that you are raising. So, I mean, I agree that there's a lot you can do in a site plan review, but more than likely, if we don't address height here tonight, it's going to be more difficult to address those at the site plan process. So I want to clarify that. Just so that you're not too trusting.
I appreciate that. That was my understanding, so thank you for clarifying that.
And in that sense, are there other 5-story buildings around, or are there 4-story buildings around? What's the typical height of the buildings?
Well, 2 or 3. 2 to 3. 3 is the highest in the immediate area in the Ridgemont development, and then includes Spruce View, I think, which is the state housing area that's on the north side of Ridgemont Drive.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Thank you, Dr. Selkirk. Any further questions for this speaker? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to be heard on this item, please come forward. Was that our gentleman who was driving here from work? Okay, great. It looks like everybody's been heard. The public hearing on this item is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Okay, let's see. Dr. Selkirk, you're first in the queue.
I have a series of questions for staff that have come up in terms of the public testimony, and I just would like to march through them if you'll be patient with me. One of them is the hydraulic modeling. As I look at this document, this is an area that's wetland, surrounded by wetland with kind of stream patterns underneath it, draining towards, is it Chester Creek? Or you know which way the water is going to ultimately be moving. And just from the experience that I have very close to my own home of how complicated it is when you develop in wetlands and how difficult it is to really determine the outcome, what are the protections in place in terms of this process, Mr. Weaver, to make sure that we actually get a drainage plan that will work? And there's two parts to this. And secondly, when it doesn't work, as it did on the corner of Muldoon and Tudor, what protects the surrounding neighborhoods from the flooding associated to a failed project, should there be a failed project?
Madam Chairman, Dr. Selkirk, there are considerable safeguards in place today with respect to drainage. We've enhanced our drainage standards. PM&E and watershed management have brought their standards up to a higher level over the past 3 to 5 years. We know that there are Class A and Class C wetlands on the northwest boundary of this property. We know we still continue to have differential settlement on Independence Park Drive. Their engineer believes that that the fill that was placed there to compress the area for future construction of Independence Drive is probably exacerbating some of that drainage problem, and that we need connectivity underneath Independence Drive to help the drainage situation. And that's going to be part of the developer's responsibility to look at the fill that was placed on Independence Park Drive. We've talked about that it probably needs additional fill for additional compaction for a period of time. This development is going to be going on for a while, that probably can take place. But this developer will have a proportional responsibility to make sure that those infrastructure improvements to Independence Drive and the subsurface improvements are constructed to mitigate any drainage impact.
Well, and should there be impacts should the plan actually result in impacts, what's the protection for the surrounding neighborhoods?
Madam Chairman, Dr. Selkirk, we'll have a subdivision agreement for Independence Drive with a financial guarantee for that for a 2-year period that will give us sufficient time to make sure that everything is functioning appropriately.
And if I have a neighborhood in my neighborhood that's more than 2 years out and it's in limbo, I'm just sympathetic to the surrounding neighborhoods. Is the city ultimately responsible if you guys approve the plans?
Well, Madam Chair,
and they come back to the city?
Certainly, that's correct. I mean, if the city is going to review and approve those plans, we're basing that on empirical information and construction methodology that it will work.
But if it doesn't work in terms of the damage on surrounding properties, who holds the bag?
Well, the municipality, obviously.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Osiander had a question, I believe, and
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Osiander.
I have questions in several areas, but since she's talking about drainage, maybe I can just interject my drainage questions. I think all of us in all of our districts have had particular drainage situations that have been problematic. And a lot of the reasons that they're problematic is an existent development had some drainage problem, and then subsequent development exacerbates the problem. It appears, from my understanding, that this Phase 4 of the Ridgemont subdivision is just now going in, and that's the section that's closest to the wetlands. Is that correct, Mr. Weaver?
Madam Chairman, Ms. Osander, that's correct. It's on the western side of Ridgemont.
All right. And that phasing of that development, I'm assuming, has already been approved, and the drainage, there's a drainage permit or some kind of, have they taken care of all of the drainage impacts from that development that's up the northern edge of the wetlands? Or is it going to be another situation where that could potentially affect this applicant?
Madam Chairman, Ms. Osander, that last phase of the development should be under a subdivision agreement. It's been discussed recently with the Assembly about their proportional share of improvements to Independence Drive, so there is a subdivision agreement. There should be sufficient safeguards in the subdivision agreement to make sure that the last phase of Ridgemont doesn't exacerbate any drainage issues.
I'm sorry, Mr. Weaver, I think I understood that. I didn't quite. There was a set-aside? Is that what you said? How did...
There's subdivision agreement in place for that last phase that should be sufficient with respect to the drainage issues.
Okay. Is the timing of this such that we'll know that for certain by the time this modeling of the drainage is done? Do you know?
Well, Madam Chair, Ms. Osander, this property here really is further down, it has its own drainage issues, that it accepts drainage from Ridgemont. It will accept drainage going in a southerly flow, so it's going to have to take into consideration what the developer did with Ridgemont in their subdivision and how to put that into both surface drainage and storm drainage to make it work. So we have looked at this in considerable detail.
I see that you have. However, most of the document that I read for P&Z deliberations seemed to center on height rather than drainage. And I just want to be clear that there is an acknowledgement that apparently it's a Spinelli development, this Ridgemont, as it's finished out, its drainage, we're not going to have a situation where both of the developers say it's the other person who's causing the problem.
Right.
Because I've seen that. And so that's what I want reassurance on, particularly since it appears this one's not done. Okay, the other part that concerns me is Independence Drive. I heard you say that there is a commitment to resurface or redo Independence Drive. Was that correct?
Madam Chair, Ms. Osander, basically Independence Drive to the north of Ridgemont's being reconstructed or has been reconstructed to some degree, and we're looking at the last portion of Independence Drive to connect into O'Malley. And with the petitioner's representative and our own engineers and PM&E and traffic, we believe that it probably needs possibly needs additional fill for better settlement of it's because it has differential settlement. It still has differential settlement today. That we believe that the fill wasn't sufficient in weight to accomplish what it was originally intended for. So that additionally has to take place. But along with that, it's probably holding some of that water that may be causing some of the drainage issues that we're going to hopefully address with the engineering of Independence Drive, which will be this developer's responsibility. He will have a proportional responsibility to complete Independence Drive.
By proportional responsibility, you mean he will bear the same proportion of the cost as fronts his property? How are you going to deal with that?
It probably will be more than that, Ms. Osander. It'll probably be back to where Ridgemont terminates because of the amount of density on this project, and that's probably where it will be that developer's responsibility to connect into.
And we have the rest of the money? Do you know?
Madam Chair, Ms. Osei, I know there is money allocated, and I know, I believe that it may not be sufficient, but that's something I believe PM&E may still be working with the present developer on rectifying. But I know there is an issue with respect to the present improvements, but not for these improvements for this developer to connect into Ridgemont.
Okay, my concern to the body is if there's already an assessment that Independence Drive needs more work, and we're told that this developer has a proportional responsibility for doing that work, are we going to be left trying to figure out, are we going to have to bond for it, or is there some funding source to do the rest of the work?
We don't know at this time. It's not anticipated that will be needed from the last discussions that took place, but I couldn't rule that out.
It's not anticipated that we'll be needing more additional.
Correct.
Right. Those are my drainage concerns.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Mr. Coffey has a follow-on to that one.
Just one follow-up, Jerry. If you look at page 29 of the study, it talks about the left in, left out off of Independence and so on, and how that would have an impact on the reconstruction. Is that what led to the concern about the upgrade of Independence, which is a city road, versus O'Malley, which is a state road?
Madam Chair, Ms. Scott, I'm not sure I'm following the question. The issue is, when will O'Malley be constructed by the state?
After 2012, it says.
Right. And what we were trying to figure out is whether there should be an interim connection, or whether we make a future connection when they raise the grade, because the grade will be raised there. This developer is proposing to start on the east side of his property with an access to O'Malley, pushing that issue into the future, and the traffic impact report will finalize that.
Okay. If I understood Ms. Osiander's question, she was concerned about the obligation of the municipality for Independence Drive. And as I read this report, the reason that Independence Drive might have to be upgraded was because of Department reserves the right to allow left turns into Independence Drive at the bottom of page 29. And my question was, is that what the state is planning? It doesn't sound like they're planning it. It sounds like they might do it. And how would you impose a financial obligation on the developer in light of that comment from the state that they reserve this right maybe in the future to do something that may require somebody to upgrade Independence Drive?
Madam Chair, Mr. Coffey, basically what that's talking about is when O'Malley is improved to its fullest extent and the grade raised, that there may be the need for additional median channelization and signalization, and then there would be a combination of both the state and the city.
And we have no idea yet when that might occur.
It's really dependent on when the state makes the improvements to O'Malley.
All right. Let me ask you one last question in this regard, if I might. What is our common practice when faced with this level of uncertainty in the confluence of state roads and city roads, and what do we generally do?
I'm sure, Mr. Coffey, what we're trying to do is put a proportional responsibility on this developer for his impact to the community, and that doesn't necessarily include the channelization and signalization at that intersection, but it does require him to construct Independence Drive to connect into O'Malley.
So we have some of that already. We're assessing, if it were, for his impacts direct, and leaving some of the more indirect ones for future. That's fine. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Coffey. Dr. Selcraig was not finished yet with her comments.
Some of my traffic questions, so those are answers. But I have a last question in terms of building height. Is the reason that the 55 feet are allowed on one end of the property because of the topography, and there's this assumption that they're going to build into the hill, Mr. Weaver?
Yes, Madam Chairman, Dr. Selcraig, that's correct. There's a difference in topography, and that's the reason for the difference in elevations. And I believe the site plans have changed since a little bit since they were originally developed, that maybe if you're particularly interested, since they're here this evening, they could go over those with you with respect to their different buildings and their heights. But in essence, the R1 district has a height of 30 feet. We're moving that up to 41 and 55. And that's basically to accommodate the additional density.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
The existing zoning on the property itself is R1, R1A,
Right.
is 30 feet in height.
Mhm.
So to accommodate the additional density, they're going to need to have additional height to accommodate the density. We've tried to ameliorate the impacts to the properties to the north, which are higher than this property, and this property is quite a bit lower than O'Malley, and in our view, and I believe in the Commission's view, that these proposed heights were appropriate.
So basically, because the property is lower, your expectation is that when you put a 5-story building on, it isn't, because the property itself is lower, the properties uphill will not be as negatively impacted? Is that, so the idea is that kind of allowing them almost an equivalent in heights? Does it work that way, though? Does it, well, I mean, are we talking about from one house, from an adjacent neighborhood of a 2-story or a 3-story house that you've got downhill from them, a 5-story house? I mean, is the grade going to work?
Yes, and that's the concept. And what Jerry's handing out, I think, is if you look on page 72, 73 of the handouts, these are
Remind us of your name, sir. Is it Mr. Hoffman?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's quite all right.
I'm sorry. If you look on page 72 and 73 of what you have, I believe, it shows that it is indeed deeper in the site as you go further west. And the way we've tucked those into the ground, it's the impact from the road anyway. The road is not going to be any much different. Now, when we talk 3 and 4 stories, those are living stories. That garage story is going to be tucked underground. So I wonder, it's not a 5-story building. It's if at max it would be 4.5, and that half story is below ground, or mostly below ground. It's a drive-under garage, is what we're planning to minimize the footprint. Now, while I have this, I want to mention one thing about the drainage. If you look at the drainage impact of this development as opposed to an R1, the impervious surface is at least less with this type of development than if you have a spread of pavement and houses. So the drainage impact is negligible as far as the differences. So I wanted to put that on the record. You understand what I'm talking about, open spaces and pavement building spaces.
How much less?
I don't have that number.
Roughly.
It's anywhere from 20 to 30% less. I mean, it could be more. When you're talking density, you're really helping the drainage impacts.
So I have another question on the height. Actually, your picture helps me.
Sure.
So it was my understanding that the higher height was allowed on only one side of the property, but it looks to me like it's actually from the illustration that you handed out, that we're actually talking about that middle section is also going to be the 55
Which page are you talking about on the big handout here?
at your illustration.
That one.
These look like the
Those
same
are the
height.
2 lower ones, yes. And that would be...
And there's one above it?
Excuse me?
There's one more above it, or?
Where's the height schematic that I actually submitted here? There's actually the one that has the height limitation. That is the actual special limitation document.
Okay.
And it's right in the middle where you come in, the top ends and the bottom. Okay. Sorry. And part of the way we're going to deal with the height, we have heard the neighbors' concerns. Other than buffering between the buildings, we're going to have to demonstrate to them, and we know we're going to have to do it planning zoning with the schematics what the height impact is going to be, and we're going to have to get everybody's buy-in on that. We put that in because that's the maximum we need for 3 and 4-story living buildings. So, that's the max. That's the minimum that we can use for those types of buildings. In my personal opinion, is when you start really shaving the building lines, you're limiting yourself to unique building types. You're talking more and more flat roofs, which aren't real appealing to me. And I think if you look on 3 and 4-story buildings, flat roofs aren't appealing. So allowing a little extra wiggle room to put dormers and architectural features on it is not something that's in anybody's worst interest. I think it's in everybody's best interest to allow that kind of architectural featuring. So.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. I have 5 people lined up to speak to you. Dr. Selcraig, are you done for the time being? Okay. Mr. Starr is next, followed by Mr. Birch.
Well, I'll just condense my into just a couple questions, and then I'll just do my final comments and get them out of the way. Mr. Weaver, can we revisit Debbie's chain of speaking just for a minute and answer me this? Now, if we said go out and do a drainage study, and that drainage study occurred tomorrow, they would get some flow numbers and some things. I'm not an engineer, but I would assume they kind of determine somehow the maximum amount of water the downstream folks need to handle, and they would do a drainage plan. What happens if the development above them develops to the full potential? Is the system down below that now has today's data, that has tomorrow's water, is it still going to work? I mean, or what? How do you do that? I mean, how does an engineer do that? Let me ask you that, just without a whole engineering summary. I just like to know, do they have a way to figure out where the maximum flow is going to go fully developed above them?
Well, Madam Chairman, our PM&E does have the ability to do those calculations with engineering analysis. They know the infrastructure, they know the sizing of the infrastructure that's in place today, and whether it's adequate to accept additional drainage, and sometimes it's not. And then other avenues need to be researched to see how the drainage can be processed. But the drainage has to be processed, and it has to have an accepting system to go into. So, and you asked the question about the property to the north as it continues to develop. All that will be taken in consideration for this property, with assumptions that that property is to the north will continue to develop.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's where we've seen 3 or 4, I guess, in the last couple of months, where it's fine if everybody sort of develops in sequence, but then all of a sudden the bottom guy thinks the system is well designed, well handled, and then here comes some more water flow that he didn't calculate or missed, and then you've got this pointing of the fingers. So that's just going to be what it is, I think, in terms of engineering and the technology that goes with that. So I'll do my final comments, because I believe that there's several things here. First off, this document here is a tremendous amount of work. I'll say, without any validity to it, as I sat on planning and zoning prior to this body, along with Mr. Coffey, and the section in here on the second page that talks about number 3, where you're going to go back with these folks with that, is probably the reason why I'm very comfortable with that, because that's not an easy task. I think we see site developments, site condo developments in particular, that didn't have that, and I surely wish they had, for a lot of reasons. Why? Because you see the finished product and you lose control of it very early on. And I'm really happy you guys are doing that. I don't know how you can afford to do it, but I'm glad that you're continuing to press on with that. I also want to commend those that spoke tonight to us here, as you didn't come back with this not in my backyard thing. What you said to us was, don't flood my backyard, and don't make my roads too crowded, and I was really appreciative of what you told us, as opposed to just coming up here and yelling at the developer or putting a burden on us to not do anything. So I was really happy with that. Going back to planning and zoning does work. That body is very experienced down here. I worked with Tony Jones when I was there, and that's been many years ago. And so you've seen Connie Oshimir as a developer. It's a really solid group, and I'm very pleased to see them go back there, and I think it can be worked out, and I believe it's a fair public process, and I'm going to support this tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mr. Birch.
Thank you, Wright. I do have several questions. There was some discussion earlier, use of municipal lands for, I think there's some comment, and I just was wondering.
I think the developer may have mentioned that. The drainage impact concept of the municipality right now, the DCM concept is zero off-site impact. So that means, we're not increasing, of course, the water that's coming onto our site. We will probably be getting more maybe from potential other developments, but the idea is our discharge off of this property is no more than it is now. I mean, we have to take into account all the pervious surfaces and try to soften the water impacts by rain gardens, by channelizations. So we're talking about downstream effects, and also because of the Class A wetland potential impact here, we're under a core regulation that, I don't know if you know about the core regulations and their fees if we misstep anything and violate the core. It's huge. It costs nothing compared to a second site plan. So we're very cognizant of the drainage impact analysis and what we're going to have to do for that. I didn't mean to get off subject for you, but we're very cognizant of it, and as is the Corps of Engineers, the wetland people at the municipality, and PM&E. Excuse me? We actually have a core determination now. It's on file at the Corps of Engineers, and they've come through and validated our assessment, which is basically what everybody knew. But now we have a set of guidelines that we can actually design to. That was part of this first step.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
If I might continue on the traffic side, we had a tussle several years ago with trying to get Independence drive through. I think somebody had committed to do it, but then not enough money was set aside. And how do you see that working? Because I think the traffic issues, there's several issues, but the traffic is one. Because I come down O'Malley and I see everybody stacked up on Independence, trying to get into the road.
Well, as you know, when they punch through Independence and make it a full standard road, it's going to alleviate a lot of the problems you see, although it potentially is going to increase the impact on O'Malley. The widening of O'Malley and the preliminary plans we're seeing on DOT will help that in that there's going to be extra lanes. Now, as our development happens, we're staging it, and this is why it's delayed us 3 years to get here. We made this application 3 years ago, and we got pushed back by the municipality traffic department because we could not come to understanding. They wouldn't basically allow us to go forward with this rezone until we had worked out this issue of at least knowing enough of the facts that we could say with some logical sequence what's going to happen. We know 2012, DOT, that's the planned date now. That may be accelerated. We don't know now. This year, they're going to start the surcharge project on Independence. Next year, they say there is potential funding for construction of the road. We don't, this is unknown. But we know, as far as the project goes, we start building it here, we're going to have to build a half width as a minimum on Independence. We're going to have to strip pave it, and we're going to have to do some improvements. We also know, and this has been brought up by DOT, and we haven't worked this out with DOT, we may actually be required to do extra lanes, and we may even be required to put some channelization with a temporary island to make this project work. And that's just to get 1 or 2 buildings in the ground. And all those improvements will probably get ripped out when they finalize the plans. I mean, these are going to be temporary things, but it's the steps that with this, that's why we have the density that we're asking for, is because there's going to be extraordinary costs on this project as far as traffic. This situation that we're talking about with the DOT MOA roads, this is not something that the MOA has really ever wrestled with, I think, because we really ran into a Stonewall 3 years ago. We're moving ahead with this because now, with the 5-year approval, we feel we can start putting the pieces together, and this has actually pushed the MOA a little bit to put that Independence Park on a little bit more of a fast track, I think, because now they're asking us if we'll allow this overfill to come into the property. They want to put 10 feet of fill to let us surcharge over the year. That's going to be a big project.
Okay. And then lastly, on with respect to some of the drainage, is there actually a storm drain?
There's a culvert that runs under the road.
So where does, if you get a whole lot of water in there, which way does it go?
Which way does it go? It goes across Independence Drive and goes to the north into that MOA wetland.
Okay.
That's that big parcel to the north of Chili Pepper?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is an MOA-owned parcel that will be developed because it is, everybody knows, a discharge wetland, but we don't say that.
Mm-hmm. And then the R1 density basically would allow single family.
Single-family homes, yes.
And the density, and
I don't know. I don't have that number right in front of me, unfortunately. But I know what the impact would be if you have 7,000 square foot lots and you have houses and you have pavement. It's not, we feel, the best interest for this property. I think there's plenty of that here.
Yep.
And that's the petitioner's vision, as it were.
And the sight lines looking to the north then, as far as you're looking at reducing the building heights into the ground with the parking and so forth?
To the north, okay, this is any other condominium building, we have 3-4 stories. The first story doesn't have good views, second story, marginal views. The top story, on the third story on all of these, looking at the view shed, we're going to have extraordinary views to the west, north. And to be honest, it should have no impact on the people driving down the Maui because they shouldn't be looking over there. So what that impact is, I don't care because they should not be looking there when they're driving down the Maui.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. Ms. Johnston.
Actually, most of my questions have been asked and answered. But I did want to get back to the Independence Drive. I was trying to remember, and Jerry, maybe you can help me out on this. We were working on the Independence Drive issue a while back with a developer who couldn't pay, or we had to give them some kind of waiver so they weren't paying for the full cost of the upgrade. Do you remember that?
Madam Chairman, Ms. Johnson, I know parts of it. I don't have all the details and all the intimate knowledge, but the developer either felt they didn't have the responsibility to do certain things that the previous developer obligated himself to with the development approval, or that they were short. And I think that issues being worked through. And I really don't have more information than that.
If I remember right, they are paying what the original development was supposed to pay for, and we had to make accommodations. But I just wanted to make note of that to make sure we don't find ourselves in a similar situation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Johnston. Mr. Flynn and Dr. Selkirk. Okay, thank you. Dr. Selkirk.
Question for staff. Does this automatically, just because of the underlying zoning, imply that there'll be perimeter landscaping to buffer the project from adjacent neighborhoods?
Madam Chairman, Dr. Selkirk, they will have to buffer against lower intensity surroundings. The irony is the property to the north is multifamily zone, but they have lower density development on the other side of O'Malley and PLI to the east, but they planned the perimeter buffering adjacent to Lake Otis and O'Malley and Independence. They do have those requirements.
Okay, I just mentioned it because of the height, that's all. I mean, okay, so the answer is yes on all 4 sides or just 3 sides?
On the 3 sides would be a requirement.
So it's not on the uphill side?
And I'm sure we'll look at that.
Okay.
We see their detailed site plan and how it may potentially impact the properties to the north.
Okay. I'd like to propose an amendment, and it's on page 2, line 6. And it says, line 6 says, prior to the issuance of any fill or building permits, the developer shall receive approval of a site plan by, and I'd like to insert before site plan, a drainage plan, hydraulic model, and site plan that take into consideration connectivity of the adjacent properties.
Okay, Dr. Selkirk, do you have that written that you can pass along for the clerk, please?
Information.
Yeah, I'm talking about the ordinance. Oh, isn't it? It's the same thing. Okay.
Dr. Selkirk, if you could pass the written version,
Let me
please.
finish writing it.
Thank you.
Could you read that back? Okay.
It says a drainage plan, hydraulic model, and site plan that includes consideration of impacts and connectivity on adjacent properties.
Okay.
Connectivity is referred to all the way through this in terms of the hydraulic issues, that's all.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, and that's the intent of it.
Okay, was there a second?
Second.
Okay. What do we have here?
And I just think that all this does is it addresses the neighbors, some of the neighbors' concerns. It raises those issues clearly at the site plan process so that those are things that the neighbors have an opportunity to discuss and you'll know that are going to be important.
Let me clerk needs that so we can get it into the record.
Yeah, we need
Okay,
to have that.
any additional discussion on the motion? On the amendment. Mr. Coffey, go ahead.
The only thing when I reviewed this document, the only thing that concerned me was that wetlands in the northwest corner and how you were going to handle the drainage and issues associated with that. I think part of the problem, is that until you've got your zoning, there's a limit to how far you can go with understanding how you're going to handle all this stuff. So if we put this in there as part of as Ms. Selcraig has suggested, and she and I have discussed it sort of as we've gone through this process, then I think that you're doing something that everybody anticipates, at least in this, that you were going to do anyway. We're not putting anything additional on you. But it makes it real clear that the drainage is going to have to be addressed appropriately at the time when the site plan is brought forward. So for that reason, I think it's appropriate to do it. And one of the concerns that I have, and I'm just going to, in the context of this amendment, if they do the rest of the development along Ridgemont, that should increase the drainage to your property because Ridgemont's above yours in elevation, is it not?
That's
It
correct.
slopes from north to south.
It slopes from north to south,
And
correct.
so therefore the drainage will come down on you, and so when
It won't necessarily come down on our side. It will start down on our side, but I believe it crosses over to the MLA parcel on the west.
Well, I understand that. It just depends on what the flow paths
That's right.
are. I
That's
understand.
correct.
But when Dr. Selcraig uses connectivity, then it's my hope that when you do it and when staff reviews it, P&Z review it, you understand that they may complete that development from east to west up on Ridgemont, and that might have some impact. So I think it's appropriate. This amendment's appropriate, and I support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? Ms. Hosiander, go ahead.
I think there's been sufficient discussion about, I guess, at this point for me, for the wetlands in the north. The part that still concerns me is the Independence Drive reconstruction, particularly since my understanding is there's a
Ms. Hosiander, is this still on the amendment?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to add traffic to it?
No, I want to get a better understanding of the amendment. All right. And that is, with the words connectivity, will the Independence Drive reconstruction, which I believe should impact the water flow or the drainage pattern. I don't know how you're going to do a drainage pattern that takes into accord the rebuild of Independence Drive. How is the plan to do that?
Right now, there are a set of plans floating out that show the drainage, the construction of Independence Drive. We've seen that. So when we do a drainage impact analysis, the best we can do is take the information we have at the time. If we need to incorporate the drainage impact analysis and outfall analysis of the new development into the big picture, that can be done. These modeling guys are pretty smart now, and we do that. And if that's part of the Assembly's desire to put that on record, that the overall effect of the entire subdivision is taken into account, we completely understand that.
The way I understood her amendment, it definitely would deal with the Ridgemont development to the north. My question is the subsequent development of Independence Drive.
Right.
Is that also covered by the drainage plan or drainage study? That's my question.
It would be, because, but based on the plans. Now, we don't know, till it's constructed, we don't know exactly what's going to be built, but we do have plans that we can analyze and incorporate into the modeling.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I want to confirm that with Mr. Weaver, if that would be the case.
Yes, Madam Chair, Ms. Hosiander.
Then I'm going to support the amendment.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hosiander. Any further comments on the amendment? Let me repeat the amendment. Dr. Selcraig's amendment begins on line 6 on page 2. Shall receive approval of a drainage plan, hydraulic model, and site plan that include consideration of impact and connectivity to adjacent properties.
And have.
And?
Receive approval of.
Shall receive approval of a drainage plan, hydraulic. I'm trying to figure out what happens with the rest of the sentence.
By the planning department.
Okay, by the planning department. Okay. All right.
And it says DOT traffic. It just goes, you replace site plan with that.
With that phrase. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Selcraig. Any further discussion on this amendment? Any objection to this amendment? Seeing none, the amendment is incorporated. Any further discussion on this item before us? Ms. Osiander, go ahead.
One more. It appears that there was a protest submitted that was found invalid. Why was it invalid?
Madam Chair, Ms. Osiander, basically it required 33 1/3% of the surrounding property owners, and it only had 16%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, please vote.
Dr. Selkirk?
Item passes unanimously. Thank you. Any, what do we have left on this agenda?
Nothing.
I'd like to just announce that that ends the public hearings for this evening. I'd like to announce that the work session on Friday, April 24th, will begin at 11 a.m. and go until 2 p.m. if we need that much time on the budget. That will be the only item. Any
Move to adjourn?
Madam Chair, wait a minute.
I have assembly comments,
Madam Chair.
Hold on one moment.
I did.
I'm sorry. Who was speaking?
There's someone who's been waiting to
Osiander, go
speak
ahead.
under non-agenda items. There's two.
We have audience participation. You're absolutely correct.
Okay, so if you don't mind, could they speak?
Yes, who is present who's been waiting to speak to us?
He just went out in the lobby. He called me.
Somebody needs to find him. Otherwise, we need to adjourn. We've been at this for 3 hours.
I understand. He's standing right there.
Sir, are you wishing to speak to us? You can speak to Mr. Coffey after we adjourn, if that's all you need to do. Okay, thank you very much for coming. Anyone else present who wishes to address the Assembly? Seeing no one.
Wait.
Okay, come on. Okay, would everyone please return to their seats? We're not quite finished. Sir, come forward if you're wishing to address the Assembly. This is audience participation, Section 17. Welcome. Please give us your name, and you have 3 minutes to address us. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. My name is Mark Lawson. I'm a 30-year resident of the city of Anchorage. I've lived in Eagle River for the past 20 years. I'm basically here to discuss, I'm not sure if everybody's even aware of what they call the scofflaw bill that was issued in 2007. I've had quite a nightmare regarding the scofflaw bill myself. Being in business, I have found that people who don't have tickets have their vehicles taken for people that do. If you have an employee working for you under this statute, if they have tickets that you're not aware of, they can take your vehicle. I have had it happen to me. Now, to take your vehicle is one thing, but it's almost tantamount to turning around, and something I never thought I'd see in this state was where you're making somebody responsible for somebody else's actions, which I cannot understand. I understand the scofflaw bill, and I'm 100% for it. When there's monies that are due, those monies need to be paid. If there are fines there, the fines need to be paid. But you don't go to an outside source and try and take the money from somebody else, or make them have to pay fees, storage, administrative fees, things like this, just to get a vehicle back so somebody else will pay their bill. I've been told by finance it's not a monetary thing. I don't know what state they live in, but it is a monetary thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. To have the denials of the municipality turning around and saying it is not is basically ludicrous. If fines are due, it becomes monetary. That's money that is owed the municipality, and those monies should be paid. But again, don't take it out on people that do not have anything to do with the fines. If I could check on every one of my employees, I don't know how many people here have employees themselves, you would have to check the scofflaw list on average twice a day for every employee you have, because they update that system on average 2 to 3 times a day. They may not be on there at 10 o'clock this morning, but they may be there at 2 o'clock that afternoon. So I'm asking not to have the bill taken away, but basically to have something done to collect it. I have turned around and I spent 18 years in collections and banking in this state with 3 different banks. In a matter of 2 hours, on one page of that list, which accounted for $192,000 in fines, I found 25 people. Not one of them have been contacted. 3 of them are municipal employees driving municipal vehicles. So if something can be done to basically quit blaming other people for other people's mistakes, that is the main thing I'm trying to get across.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Lawson. We have a question for you. Dr. Selcraig and Mr. Birch.
I can just tell you, you are not the first person to be here, and in your comment is very sensible. And the question is I guess we're all kind of stuck. I just want to turn to the administration. Is it possible to garnish people's permanent fund?
Through the chair, Dr. Selcraig, yes, it is, and we do it.
So why do we do this, too?
Often the municipality is not the lead debtor who has first priority to getting the funding. Often that might go to child support or things like that.
But it would seem to me even child support, it seems like this is something we need to work out with the state. Because, it is not really, we have this unintended consequence, and we hear about it pretty regularly, where somebody who had nothing to do with the problem is in a financial situation where they have to pay to get their automobile back. So I guess I'm interested in what do we need to do to negotiate with the state to have it be, whether we're in first or second or third, a situation that these things are just dealt with by garnishing people's permanent funds. It just seems like this is an odd way to fix it.
Well, Dr. Selcraig, through the chair, I don't believe that the garnishing of the funds would completely eliminate the debt for most of the individuals who are on the scofflaw list. They have significant funds that are due. But I'd be happy to have Finance and Dan Moore take a look at that and either get with you or send you a memo to that.
Or garnishing their wages, if they owe the money. You're probably the 10th or 8th or 7th person who's come up here, and it's a very rational concern, and I think we should be working on it. So I appreciate
I'm confused. It has nothing to do with child support. These are unpaid traffic fines.
In
nothing
some
to do with
cases,
child
it's more than
support.
that.
This could be anything from a parking light being out that you didn't pay the $30 fine, or a $200 fine for window tint that you didn't pay.
Right. I think we need to work on it, and I appreciate that you came down here and reminded us, and we have real work to do here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Selcraig. Mr. Birch.
I'd like to thank you as well, and I've had a number of contacts. What type of business are you in?
I have a landscaping and snow plowing business.
So basically, it'd be just employees that
driving oriented, yes.
Sign up, and okay. And then, do you have any specific recommendations? I think this, I would agree with Ms. Selcraig that it's, it'd be appropriate. Maybe we need to make a change. How would you see the city recovering that?
I've spoken with previous collection officers that I've dealt with, and if I had the powers that the municipality or the state government had at my disposal when I was in banking, we would be able to go after permanent funds, garnish tax returns. You can go after wages. You can take the vehicles of the people who own them. Check the people on the list. If they have a valid license, suspend their license until they're paid. That is what the purpose was to keep dangerous drivers off the road, not to collect fines according to the municipality. So if you're going to keep dangerous drivers off the road, even the Commissioner of Public Safety stated, this Commissioner Glass, he said that when you have 3 tickets to one person of over $1,000 in fines, he pays the tickets. They could be speeding tickets, serious fines, or serious offenses. Then you have one that does pay it, One pays it, one doesn't. The one that's on the list is the one that doesn't. So it has nothing to do with public safety. The one who paid his fines is just as bad a driver as the one who didn't pay the fines. So there's a lot of different ways you can collect them, which the finance department does not do. They send a letter. That's all they do.
Yeah. I personally would be interested in following up with some of your recommendations, perhaps not here and now, but I would very much, maybe we need a bounty or of some sort on that.
Well, if you saw the amount of fines, I was baffled when I saw just the page L's was over $190,000. Just one page of the L's was just outrageous. I didn't know they were that bad.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Birch. Any further questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Any further assembly comments?
I have one.
Mr. Starr, go ahead.
I'd like to just make sure that, traditionally the meeting after an election, we traditionally reorder this body and this board. So I want to make sure that it's known that I intend to make a motion next meeting to talk about our leadership.
That would absolutely be appropriate. I believe the code says by the third meeting following the election, which would be the 28th.
Well, in the spirit of Mr. Gutierrez's comments before, it's not to surprise anybody. It's not to pull a fast one. So if it's not on the agenda, perhaps, make mention of it so that, we can do our work, or we start, a little bit earlier, some way to have a rational conversation about it. Because I think it's just a tradition that works, and I think it's an appropriate conversation to have every year, and it's traditionally done, right after we certify an election. So I'd like to respond that I'll move it, or somebody else can move it, but I want to have a prudent discussion about our leadership, other opportunities towards committee work, all the things that go with effective leadership. It's not to speak badly against your role here. Mm-hmm. I'd like to make sure that that's mentioned. It's just, I think, a tradition that works. So I intend to move it. Thank you.
Would that be next meeting, sir?
I think so.
Yes.
It's traditionally what it is.
I believe it's on the agenda for the 28th.
Great. I didn't know.
I'm sorry, ma'am. Are you here to speak to us on?
I just wanted to ask good afternoon, everyone.
Okay,
my name is Cheryl.
Go ahead. Please pull the microphone down to your mouth. Thank you. Tell us who you are.
My name is Sheridan Williams, and I ride the transit bus 90%. And I want to know when will you all have another meeting about the transit and discontinue some buses. And I would also like to ask, is there any way that the Assembly can send out better notices as far as transit and the Assembly meetings on city issues so that more people can come to these meetings? And a lot of times we don't know about the meetings until the spur of a moment on the news, and then it's too late to get here. But there's not enough notification, like the big signs on the buses advertising this different commercial products or whatever. Can they take some of that money? Does the Assembly have the budget to afford putting out a notice on the bus so that people can know that these meetings are being held, so we can get more of the city people involved with greater participation? Because I feel as though the Assembly has a lot on their plate, but you're not getting enough participation from the people. And then when the people don't have room to speak when they don't come to the meetings. So you all don't know how everyone feels. And I feel we should be as one. The city of Anchorage, the people of Alaska, as well as the Assembly, that will break down a lot of discord, disharmony, and disrespect. And I'm asking, is there any other way that we can get better notification than just on the spur of a moment from Channel 2, 4, 11, and 13 News? And I would like to be here for the next meeting on the city transit buses.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, I think we have some questions for you. Dr. Selkirk?
Well, one point in time that's important is that we're at our next meeting, I believe it's on the 28th. It's our next meeting. We're going to be talking about first quarter budget revisions, and I think there's an intent on this body, at least from my perspective, to really work to bring the money back to transit that needs to be there to fund those buses in those areas that were cut. So it would be important to show up at that meeting and for people who care about the buses to come out and let us know that that's a priority.
Yeah, because a lot of people have reading problems. They can't read, or visual problems, and they can't see the signs. and there's so much advertising on the bus, they overlook them. The little announcement sitting behind the dryer in the little bulletin space. And I just want to see more people come out and participate and speak up for the buses, because the buses is like the emergency room.
It is.
It's a daily need.
So it's the 28th of April, and you might talk to people and have them come on out and let us know what's important for them.
All right, I really will. I
Thanks
really
for
will.
coming down tonight. Thank you.
Because I'm here to try to make sure we don't lose and see if we can come together as one to gain.
Thank you, ma'am.
you very much.
There are legal requirements that the Assembly has for announcement of its meetings, and the clerk, the municipal clerk will be happy to explain that.
That's fine with me, as long as I learn what your system, your department requires as far as knowledge versus lack of knowledge. I would like to be informed, and whatever it takes.
Our agendas are
because everybody don't take the newspaper and see the little announcements in the paper, or the mail outs. If they come in the mail, at bulk weight announcements, assembly meetings like they do when they're campaigning for mayor and governor. You get all this junk mail, but we don't get enough notification from the assembly.
We don't traditionally send out notices for each of our regular meetings, but they are posted on the internet and they are published. If Madam Clerk would
okay, that's another.
tell us.
A lot of people don't have the internet, and I don't. But I just want to find your ways of communicating with the people and with I myself, so that I can be a responder.
Understand.
The agendas are published in the Journal of Commerce every week.
Ma'am?
The agendas are published in the Journal of Commerce, which you can pick up at the grocery stores usually.
I sure will. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much
Take
for
good
coming.
time. God bless everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Dr. Selkirk?
Just as a point for clarification, I'd just like to have some explanation regarding the timing for assembly action if we choose to override, or at least to vote to override the mayor's veto. And do we have 21 days from the date, is that 21 days from today to act? And maybe, Ms. Tucker, could you just clarify that for us?
You have 21 days, I believe, after the notice that the mayor gives of the explanation.
And I assume that what we received today is the notice?
Yes.
Okay. So I do plan to raise this at our next meeting then. Thank you.
Okay. That was yesterday that it was noticed.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Gutierrez?
Madam Chair, that actually raises an important question, if the notice was today or if the notice was yesterday. Because if the notice was today, then I believe the meeting of May 12th falls within that 21-day window. If the notice was yesterday, it does not, which means if we're going to take action on the veto, we would have to do it by the meeting of the 28th, or a special meeting, which I don't know that we really want to do, but that's important. So was the notice date today or was the notice date yesterday?
It was made yesterday.
All right.
And I would appreciate it if, Ms. Tucker, if you would just do a kind of, I'd like to know the implications of this. I guess I'm concerned about the implications of the mayor vetoing a procedural matter in terms of us establishing our procedures at the Assembly. I'm wondering, does that mean that he could also veto our selection for chair or for an office? I guess I'd like some clarification of that. Could you provide that just in an email to us?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Selkirk.
I have a procedural question.
Okay, Mr. Coffey, go ahead.
Is the date of the notice the date of receipt or to the Assembly, or is it the date that is put on a memorandum prepared by the mayor?
Notice of which? You mean the veto action?
Yeah.
It's the date that's stamped in the clerk's office when we deliver it to the clerk.
Okay. That's what I want to hear from the lawyers, because it was late. It was brought out tonight. It wasn't on the agenda. And so
It was received today.
Okay. I wasn't here.
It was emailed yesterday.
Hey, can I just ask a simple question? Is it the date of is that the answer from the Department of Law? Is it the date it's given to the clerk?
Mr. Coffey, through the chair, I haven't looked at that specifically, but it sounds right. I understand that Ms. Tucker is going to be addressing all of these, and we'll compare notes and confer about it.
Thank you.
I guess if there's one of the things that I'm a little concerned about is kind of a motivation behind this, and it's my understanding that there's different perceptions from Mr. Tucker and Mr. Reeves regarding Mr. Clayman's right to return to the chair in July 1. And if there are two different perspectives on that, I'd also like that written up, because I'm concerned a little bit about the intention behind this this veto. What concerns me is if it may be that Mr. Clayman is interested in remaining in chair, and which makes me think that maybe he would veto the proposed action that Mr. Starr proposes to bring next week. So I'm a little uncomfortable about what's happening. It doesn't seem clear to me. And if there's some different perspectives in terms of council, I'd like both of those perspectives presented to us in a clear way so that we could deliberate on them. The sooner the better, since there's a time issue here for next week. Thanks very much.
Dr. Selkirk, I'd like to let the body know that I have asked a number of these questions of the administration and of Mr. Reeves, and I'm expecting a response tomorrow, which I will share with the body.
And it's my understanding that Mr. Reeves and Mr. Tucker don't completely agree. Ms. Tucker, I'm sorry, Mr. Tucker, in the library. No, I'm sorry. Anyhow, when we have different perspectives from council, it's nice to have both of those perspectives presented to us. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe Ms. Tucker has been consulted.
Thank you.
Mr. Gutierrez, question?
Thank you. Actually, along with those lines as well, in discussions earlier tonight, I discovered there are past opinions by previous municipal attorneys on the extent of the mayor's veto power, and I'm wondering, Mr. Reeves, if you would be willing to share those with all assembly members. I certainly would like to see those.
Mr. Gutierrez, through the chair, yes, of course we can do that. We've provided them to Ms. Tucker, and I'll confer with her about the best way to distribute them to everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments from the assembly? Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.